Chapter 460. Although the Freemasons' wandering souls could also take over someone's body, it was fundamentally different from what Li Yunqin learned from Bai Yanjun. The Freemasons' possession was to take over a body. According to Li Yunqin's observation and what Zhou Xian had said before. For example, the wandering soul who took over the bodies of the two sages could not fully exert the power of this body. It was just wearing a piece of clothing. However, when he took over Long Jiu's body, he filled his soul into the emptiness of qi when on the basis of Long Jiu's death. This was something similar to the position of a god. Only dragons had it in the whole world and they could be counted with 2 hands. After the possession he would have all the power that Long Sun should have, and he would have the strongest body in the world in the same realm. The 2 wandering souls of the Freemasons said something about the 6 desires reincarnation. Didn't they just want to have a body of their own? Once they knew this secret, how could they let him occupy the emptiness of qi when? So, he said, take over Long Jiu's body. And Su Yusong didn't seem to have any objection to this. This meant that for some reason, Lu Ling didn't tell the details of that night. After Li Yunqin killed Long Jiu, the 9th young master's body disappeared, and there was no body for him to take over. So, they didn't ask in detail. Or did Lu Ling return a favor because Li Yunqin saved her from Dongting? But in any case, Li Yunqin wanted to continue. He paused slightly. At that time I had no way out. Long Jiu pestered me. That demon couldn't be reasoned with. When he was happy he could tease me, but when he was angry he would hit me until I vomited blood. Being with him was like being with a tiger. I was always on the edge of life and death. Unfortunately, Lu Ling came to the city of Wei and forced me. Compared to now, the situation at that time was more dangerous. I couldn't reason with Long Jiu. I can reason with Lu Ling, but I don't have the capital to do so. Thus I thought, rather than being killed by them, I might as well give it my all. Li Yunqin squinted his eyes, as if he was immersed in the pleasure of the success of his previous scheme. Of course I know the method of possession. There were such methods in the painting Dao, for example turning the void into reality, drawing a body out of thin air. In the past I used this method to create the body of the 3 flowers that I was sitting on. Therefore I set up an array to ensure that my divine soul wouldn't be lost. He also provoked a fight between Long Jiu and Lu Ling. The best case scenario would be for Long Jiu to die and for me to take over his body. The worst case scenario is that Lu Ling dies and I take her body. Although she's a woman, her aptitude is excellent and she's a good choice. In the worst case scenario, both of them would perish together, leaving nothing behind in this world. I can only possess a random person and wait for the right time. He paused and exhaled softly. But in the end it was the best result. Su Yusong and Zhou Muzha kept staring at him without any change on their faces. Although Su Xing was alive, he was still in a coma. Su Xing didn't speak, so Su Yusong became a calm and steady person again. After Li Yunqin finished his words, Su Yusong paced around in silence, as if he was trying to figure out whether what he said was true or not. Or, the possession that Li Yunqin mentioned was actually something that wandering souls like them could do, so he was slightly disappointed. He was disappointed but also slightly suspicious. After a dozen breaths, Su Yusong suddenly turned to look at him. You possessed Long Jiu, and with the power of wish, you achieved the true state with this demon's body. Then the previous arrangement in the wild forest was even bigger. You must want to advance another level. This time who are you going to possess? Li Yunqin answered without hesitation. Besides me there's another Long Sun who is in the true state. 7 Long Suns are in the mysterious state and they can also practice the way of demons. Any one of the 8 of them can do it. That's why I came up to Cloud Mountain, to make sure that you know the intentions of Long Sun and that you can kill them. Su Yusong shouted again. Make sure? How can you be sure that we are going to kill Long Sun? Li Yunqin smiled. Of course I'm sure. And I believe that in your original plan, killing one or a few Long Sun occupied an important position. In the past, demons and Xianmen lived in harmony because they didn't want to start a full-scale war. Now that the full-scale war has begun, for the wandering souls of the Freemasonry, what other body could be better than the body of dragons? Since you like to live by possession, you will certainly not waste a great resource like Long Sun. You will certainly find a way to kill them and leave their bodies intact. Go through. Just like me in the past. And I just need to seize the opportunity and a little bit of courage. Su Yusong and Zhou Muzha looked at each other. Then Zhuo said, "So, how are you going to make sure that we can kill Long Sun?" Li Yunxin's face showed a little joy. Zhuo question seemed to mean that they agreed with his statement to a certain extent. It also meant that things were developing in a good direction. So he immediately answered, "Dragons have a secret. The dragon soul is immortal. The soul of Dragon 9 who was killed by me before, was attached to Hatred's body. However, this kind of coexistence can't last long. As time passes, the guest will be assimilated and absorbed by the master. Therefore, the plan of Zither Lady and Hatred is actually similar to yours. In this war, they will consume as many demon soldiers and demon generals as possible, and then use the great formation they set up to turn those dead souls into the power of will, which they can enjoy alone. Dragons don't care about other demons and only regard them as sacrifices that can be sacrificed. Therefore, even if they are defeated in the war, they can still have the cultivation of the peak of the profound realm, and even kill a few brothers and sisters and concentrate the dragon soul on one or two people, and then it is possible to use the body of a demon to break through the realm of supreme indifference. You should be clear now. This is an unprecedented war, in fact, except for those low-level demons and cultivators of Xianmen who don't know the truth, the rest of the leaders among the forces. None of them really care about the outcome of this war. What they want is either the dead souls or the collapse of the Xianmen. This war between the Xianmen and the demons is actually just a piece of meat pie, the flesh and blood of those demons and cultivators. Those demons and cultivators used to treat the people of the secular world as pigs and dogs and blood food. Till now, how can they think that they have become blood food for others? After saying this, he looked at Su Yusong. "I have told you everything. You should know that I am sincere. There are still 8 Long Sun, you can take over any one of them. But you should keep me. It only took me a few months to go from the peak of the transcendent stage to the advanced perfected stage. Whether you admit it or not, there is no one else in this society who can match me in wisdom and courage, except for the 2 of you. And you already have the body of the Supreme Sage, and my dragon body is useless. In front of you, you also have 2 choices. Kill me to ensure your safety and get rid of a considerable fighting force. Or, take out your courage and gamble whether I am sincere so that in the future war, whether with the Xianmen or with the elders, you have a better chance of winning." Su Yusong's expression still did not change, but he still remained silent. But Zhuo smiled, threw away the book in his hand and stood up. "Courage? People like you do not need us to show any courage." After saying this, he took 3 steps and went out of the door. Li Yunxin only looked at Su Yusong. The fake sage was silent for a moment and then shook his head. "You are a heaven-sent genius. And also a double-edged sword. But, indeed, it is not enough for me to show any courage." Su Yusong looked at Li Yunxin. "Guqin Jun planted a restriction on you and said, if you do not return in 10 days you will die. In that case, your life will be handed over to the restriction." Su Yusong flicked his sleeve, and Su Xing and the scattered objects and magic treasures on the table were all collected by him. Then he turned and went out. "From tomorrow on, a day in Mount Shaoyun is a day in the world. You still have 12 days. If you can think of a way to break his restriction and live, I will let you live. If you can't think of a way, it will be your life. The world is dangerous and not everything is under your control. Now have a taste of what it feels like to be a victim of your own cleverness." Li Yunxin was stunned, and then his eyes widened and he shouted in disbelief, "You want me to die here? Are you crazy? Do you think you can fight against the Xianmen, the elders, and the demons with the wandering souls in your hands? You will regret it." But no one answered him. He wanted to rush out of the door and chase after them, but an invisible restriction stopped him in front of the door, and he could not take half a step out. Then, he saw a touch of white in the night sky in the distance. The day of Mount Shaoyun had begun. It also meant that the first day of the remaining 12 days had begun. It also meant that he only had 12 days left to live. If he really could not find a way out. Li Yunxin stared at the gradually brightening sky and shouted again, "You will regret it." His voice echoed in the courtyard in front of the house and soon disappeared. Li Yunxin took a deep breath, and after a long time he slowly exhaled, and turned his head to look at the painting music in the cool palace on the white wall. As expected, the painting was covered with a layer of golden light, which kept flowing as if it was also sealed. The house had become a cage and he was imprisoned in it. He stood in front of the house for a long time, and then moved to try the other windows. The result was exactly the same as he expected. Su Yusong did not make any mistakes, and the doors and windows were all unbreakable. Therefore Li Yunxin clenched her teeth and punched the window frame. She lowered her voice and squeezed out the words from between her teeth. Son of a b****. Why aren't you coming out to save me at this time? What the hell is he doing underground? Chapter 461. The first of the remaining 12 days was a difficult day for Li Yunxin. It seemed to be the same for those who weren't in the Cloud Mountains. For example, Zhou Xian, who was in the palace on the same day. This was a small palace compared to the spacious palaces of other emperors. But for Zhou Xian, the moment he walked into this palace was the happiest and most glorious moment of his life. This place was called Auspicious Spring Palace. It was one of the few temporary imperial residences of the Emperor of Yu and also the largest one. It was located by the Rhone River and backed by Dangyang Mountain. Zhou Xian, who had raised his troops in the name of Prince Rong, settled down in the temporary imperial residence. At this time the situation in Yu had somewhat stabilized. The Rong army and Yu army had divided the country equally. But the Rong army also needed to temporarily rest and reorganize their troops in order to finish the battle in one fell swoop. The Yu army also needed to lick their wounds and look forward to quelling the rebellion. Thus, the two sides temporarily reached a strange and tacit peace. Separated by the Rhone River, they could almost hear the snoring of the other side's soldiers at night, but neither side took the initiative to attack. But at this critical moment, Prince Rong Zhou Xian had to make a difficult decision. What made him feel awkward was a person. This person was not the sorcerer sent by Mu Nanju to help, nor was he the sword palace that stood on the sidelines and did not help either side. But his most capable general, the current great commander of the three armies, Ingjuren. In fact, there were not many people in the three armies. There were only about 30,000 soldiers in total. Excluding the personal troops of the various feudal lords, and Prince Rong Zhao Xian's Yulin royal guards, there were only about 20,000 soldiers left. And these 20,000 soldiers were only under the command of the great commander of the three armies. The number that great commander Ingjuren could really command was only about 4,000. About 1,000 people were his former subordinates. That day Prince Rong Zhao Xian received a dream from the Wei River Dragon King in the magistrate's office, asking him to welcome two talented people, one civil and one military. The civil official was called Lu Gongzan. Zhao Xian did not come to welcome them. Not only did they not welcome him, but they also heard that Mount Jun, where the hermit Lu Gongzan lived in seclusion, had been bombarded by the heavenly thunder. They were very frightened. He wondered if his previous hesitation had angered the Dragon King and caused him to take away his military counselor. But at least a general came to greet him. It was this Ingjuren. When he came, he brought a team of more than 1,000 people. For Zhao Xian, who was just starting out, it was like sending charcoal in snowy weather. And these 1,000 or so people were not the small fries who were pulled out from the fields, randomly distributed sticks and rushed to the battlefield. Instead, they were elite soldiers who knew how to give commands and could form groups. Ingjuren had already told Li Yunxin about the identities of these so-called elite soldiers. In the past, they were bandits from the Black Stockade stronghold on Mount Chuyun in the Qin Kingdom. However, bandits had their principles and did not kill the innocent. In the eyes of the powerful Qin people, these bandits were not very capable. But when they came to the Yu Kingdom, they were like tigers among a flock of sheep. It must be known that the Yu Kingdom had been controlled by the Sword Palace for a long time. Now suddenly, 1,000 tigers and wolves who had seen blood even if they had never killed before had suddenly come. How could they not break through like a hot knife through butter? Originally, the Sword Palace was a support. But strangely, when the Rong army raised the banner of righteousness, the Sword Palace watched from the sidelines and no longer cared about other matters. Some said that the Yu Emperor had lost his way. Others said that the demon cultivators of the Sword Palace had been summoned by various demon kings to go to the Yi Kingdom. Thus, the Sword Palace was empty. There were all kinds of explanations, but the truth was, with the 1,000 elite soldiers that Ingjuren had brought as the core, Rong King Zhao Xian quickly gathered tens of thousands of soldiers. Everywhere they passed, there was no one who did not surrender at the sight of the wind. Occasionally there was resistance, but they were all swept away by Commander Ing. Could truly be said that they broke through like a hot knife through butter. Because of this contribution and because he was a talented general that the Dragon King had entrusted to him, Rong King Zhou personally made him the commander of the 3 armies. The honeymoon-like days between the two of them only lasted for a little over a month. After Rong King entered the auspicious Spring Palace, conflicts and animosity arose. In Zhao Xing's opinion, the main responsibility for this matter lay with Ying Juren. This commander Ying, perhaps because he was used to being a mountain bandit, was actually very unruly. However, he seemed to have the capital to be unruly. Rumor had it that he was somewhat famous on the Jianghu of the Qin kingdom and could be considered a great master in the martial world. When he came to the Yu kingdom to raise a matter, many martial artists of the Qin kingdom came to join him. This gave his reputation a boost. After that, the area around the Wei River in the Qin kingdom suffered one disaster after another. Many commoners lost their homes and lost their homes. Many bandits and heroes who used to live on those commoners could no longer stay in the Qin kingdom. Then they heard from their former comrades that after they went to the Yu kingdom to seek refuge with the former Black Knife, now Commander Rong King Ying, they were able to get some official positions. Every day they could eat and drink well, but their opponents were all weaklings. With such a good thing, how could those people who lived on the edge of a knife not be happy? Thus more and more people came. In the end, there were more than 500 people who came from the Qin kingdom. There were not enough official positions under the commander, so he organized some of the people who were not very skilled in martial arts into the Green Forest camp. When these Green Forest camp soldiers fought noisily, perhaps they could only be slaughtered when facing the Qing army, but they were facing the Yu army. Thus for a time they were in the limelight. In this way, Ying Juren not only had the 4,000 Black Knife army formed from the previous 1,000 soldiers, but also the Green Forest camp that had come from the Yu kingdom to assist him. This was already the largest force in the Rong army. Prince Rong had twice the number of Yulin Forest guards in Zhao Xing's hands, but the problem was that if they actually fought, they would probably only be able to flee. Thus, when Zhao Xing realized that something was wrong, even when he spoke to Commander Ying, he sometimes had to use a negotiating tone. The treasured cauldron had yet to be in his hands, but the throne had already been taken by someone else. Even if it was a talent that Dragon King had entrusted to him, Zhao Xing could not tolerate it. What further intensified the conflict between the two of them was what happened yesterday. Yesterday, Prince Rong had ascended to the throne in Yichuan Palace to discuss one matter. Now that he had taken over half the country and stood as an equal with Emperor Yu, was the title of Prince Rong not enough to gather the hearts of the people? After all, in the beginning their banner was to clean up the side of the emperor. Now that the country had been stabilized, it seemed that they should consider other things before planning for the future. In reality, everyone knew that Prince Rong wanted to become emperor. However, the matter of establishing a country for Rong had just been brought up when it was opposed by Commander Ying. The reason for his opposition was actually very legitimate. There were 2 main points. First, now that they were halfway through the important matters, morale was high. The most important thing to do was to flatten the Yu kingdom in one fell swoop after resting and reorganizing, attack Jingdo and capture and kill Emperor Yu, completely cutting off the thoughts of certain people looking at both sides. After all, the Yu kingdom was a country and not some motley crew. Presently, their battle power was declining because their military had been lax for a long time. It was like an irrigation channel whose source had been cut off. However, the Yu kingdom still had many officials and military generals. Once they were given enough time, they would quickly adjust and receive an endless stream of soldiers to replenish their numbers. It was like opening up the water channel at the source again. Those dried-up canals were still canals and would quickly fill up again. However, the half of the country they occupied had gone through the fires of war. It was like digging a new canal. Many places were still not clear and government orders could not be carried out. Although the Rong army was good at fighting, it was only relative to the more lax Yu army. Once the Yu army reacted based on the hundreds of years of experience left behind by the predecessors of the Yu kingdom or received aid from other countries, then the Rong army's situation would be very disadvantageous and could even ruin his great cause. Secondly, what they were doing now was actually very taboo. For thousands of years, which emperor did not want to expand their territory and become the ruler of the world. However, only the Qin kingdom 500 years ago succeeded in overthrowing it. It was because the previous dynasty's Emperor Yi had angered the goddess and was punished by the heavens. As for the others, Even the most powerful Li kingdom did not dare to send troops to the surrounding small countries. This was because Daotong and Kenzo did not allow this. They wanted a long period of peace in the world and for the people to rest and build up their strength. What they were doing now was a great evil that disobeyed the immortals. Since for some reason, there were no immortals interfering, they should take Jingdo in one go to avoid long nights of trouble. When the royal family of the Yu kingdom died, even if the immortals noticed what was happening here and wanted to interfere, what could they do? The new dynasty had already been established and officials had been sent everywhere. As long as they did a decent job, presumably the immortals could only accept this result because they were not devoted to the royal family of a certain country, but to the people of the world. He raised these 2 points, and the officials in the hall all nodded in agreement, thinking that Commander Ing had thought it through thoroughly. For the sake of Prince Rong's future career, he should not proclaim himself emperor here. Instead, he should go to Jingdo to complete this matter. Zhou Xian also knew that Commander Ying's words made sense. However, the problem was not whether what he said made sense or not. The problem was, he openly opposed him in the hall, on such an important matter as the throne. Moreover, when he opposed him, the officials actually said, were they Prince Rong's officials or Ing Juren's officials? Really, Ing Juren was just a person from Jianghu. How did he know so much about the world's situation? Where did he come from? Therefore Zhao Xing had to face a choice, to get rid of this Ing Juren before his power grew or to take a gamble. This Ing Juren was indeed loyal to his master and everything he said was really for his sake. In fact, this choice was not too difficult. Anyone who wanted to sit firmly on the throne should choose the former. Compared to the interference of immortals, the general trend of the world and all kinds of distant and ethereal threats, Ing Jiren, who had elite troops in his hands, was the most terrifying and practical factor. So Prince Rong Zhao Xing sat in front of the table, drank a pot of wine, and waved his hand to summon the loyal servant beside him. The preparation lasted for about an hour. It should be, among all the coups in the world, the preparation was the fastest. In fact, there was nothing to prepare. The matter of killing Ing Juren had been in his mind for a few days, and he had long thought about what he should do if he wanted to kill Ing Juren. Zhao Xing thought that the people in Ing Juren's hands, the Qin Kingdom's Green Forest camp, were only there for glory, splendor and wealth. What Ing Juren could give them he could also give. He could even give more. As for the strong soldiers from Black Stockade Fort in his hands, there were only 800 or 900 of them. He could call the Green Forest Army to fight with them, or he could use all the Yulin royal guards in his hands. 10,000 people could kill 1,000 people, could they not? The next thing to do was to place executioners behind the pillars in the hall and cover them with screens. He sent someone to call Ing Juren into the hall. After a few words, he threw a cup as a signal, and the executioners on both sides came out and immediately chopped him into meat paste. The leader was executed and the rest of the people were not important. His position as emperor could be stabilized. After killing him, he could become emperor. Then he could use his remaining power to flatten the Yu kingdom. Thinking of this, he drank another cup of wine. When he looked up with drunken eyes, he found that the servant he sent out had returned. Behind him was a group of executioners, and there was a sorcerer beside him. He recognized the sorcerer. He was from Mu Nanju. After they started the rebellion, people from Mu Nanju suddenly came to the city and said that they could help him. Zhao Xing used to be a constable in Chengdu, and he knew that Mu Nanju had a lot of power behind them, but he did not think that they would be of much help in this war. Until they sent sorcerers. He was from the Yu kingdom and was used to seeing demons since he was young, so he was not unfamiliar with magical things. Therefore he was not very surprised to see the sorcerers, but he was surprised as to why they wanted to help him. The sorcerer only said that the master of Mu Nanju had seen the tragedy of the Yu kingdom for a long time, and wanted to do something. Now that Prince Rong was united, he felt that it was a good opportunity, so he came. Zhao Xing was naturally happy for such a good thing, and he was also very satisfied with the performance of the sorcerers. In fact, they did not use any magical powers. Instead, they used a more powerful and terrifying power than magical powers. That was information. Every time they went, they would report the number of soldiers stationed there, who the general was, how strong they were, where they were moving and where they were gathering. Saying that he knew the Yu kingdom like the back of his hand was not enough to describe Prince Rong's army. Should be, he knew them better than his own army. Therefore, every battle he went to was a great victory, like a heavenly general. Now that the sorcerer from Munanju came, he asked his servant. The servant said that when he went out to prepare for something important, the sorcerer also came. After asking carefully, he learned that the sorcerer also thought that the situation in the Rong army was not good. As the saying goes, two tigers cannot live on the same mountain. The conflict between Prince Rong and the general had affected the overall situation and the morale of the army. One must be eliminated to save the lives of the three armies and prepare for the upcoming decisive battle. Therefore he came today to solve this problem, but unexpectedly his thoughts coincided with Prince Rong's. Zhou Xian was overjoyed and told his plan in detail to the sorcerer. Before he planned to do this today, he was a little nervous and worried. Therefore he wanted to drink a little and think slowly. Unexpectedly, after drinking a little, his mind became cheerful and he asked someone to bring another pot of wine. When this pot of wine was finished, all the worries from before disappeared. He immediately decided to kill that Ingjuran today. Now that he was still in the mood to drink, he talked a lot. When he saw the sorcerer from Munanju, he felt a little heroic. Although his tongue was a little numb when he spoke, he did not know it. When he finished talking, the sorcerer only smiled and said that this matter was very promising. Zhou Xian saw the sorcerer's smile in his blurred vision due to the alcohol, and his heart felt even more at ease. Therefore he ordered the executioners to hide and sent his servant to summon Ingjuran, saying that he wanted to discuss crossing the Rhone River and going straight to the capital. Chapter 462. About a quarter of an hour had passed. Before he made up his mind, he was full of ambition. But now that he had started to wait, he felt that this quarter of an hour was extremely unbearable. Zhou Xian sat upright in front of the table with a saber by his hand. He reached out and tried again and again, feeling that he could get it with just a stretch of his hand. Today was a cloudy day. There were few candles in the hall, so the light was even dimmer. It seemed to be evening when he arrived at his table. On his left were servants and on his right were mages. Behind the screens on both sides of the hall, 40 axemen were lying in ambush. Thinking about this arrangement, Zhou Xian felt more at ease. Finally, he heard footsteps. But it wasn't one person but many people. Zhou Xian was surprised and straightened up to look at the servant next to him. The servant lowered his voice and said, "Didn't His Majesty order us to call all of our people? I asked them to come with Ingjuran. It'll be harder for him to escape." But he couldn't remember what he had said before. The alcohol made him dizzy and his attention became dull, but he was still focused. There was only one thought in his mind: to kill Ingjuran. So he squinted at the door of the hall. The first one to enter was undoubtedly Ingjuran. He always wore black clothes. After the uprising, he conquered Xiang County and found a black armor in the county warehouse. He loved it so much that he immediately put it in his pocket. He didn't even have time to count it. Thinking of this, Zhou Xian frowned again. After being executed, he took the armor and burned it. This Ingjuran, with a black saber at his waist, paused at the door for a moment. Zhou Xian held his breath, afraid that he would notice something was wrong. Unexpectedly, he reached out and brushed his body, then continued to move forward. He was a little relieved and looked behind him. Indeed, they were his people. Some were old brothers who had followed him since the uprising in Chengdu, and some were new followers. When this group of people entered the hall, the heavy door closed behind them. The light outside was immediately blocked and the hall became dark. From the door to Zhou Xian's table was more than 50 steps. At such a distance and in such a dark environment, he could not see Ingjuran's face clearly, so he could only count his steps. After they had walked more than 20 steps, he opened his mouth and said in a deep voice, "Great Commander Ing, do you know why I have summoned you here?" Ingjuran's footsteps stopped. Zhou Xian could see his figure standing upright in the darkness. After about 2 breaths' time, Ingjuran finally spoke. "Prince Rong summoned me, but only me." It could be seen that this matter was extremely secretive. A few days ago, I openly contradicted Prince Rong in front of the palace. Prince Rong will certainly be furious. Could it be that you called me here to denounce you? When Zhou Xian heard his words, he immediately thought of the man's usual arrogant and domineering manner. Even when he saw him, his face was always stiff and cold, and there was no respect in his words. It was as if he was not his king but a bandit leader who was similar to him. Thus, the anger in his heart was ignited. He slammed his hand on the table and shouted, "How dare you? Since you know this, why don't you kneel down and beg for mercy?" Maybe I can let you die in one piece. After listening to his words, the people behind Ing Juren understood what was going on. They had long thought that the two would not get along or that they would break up. But they never thought that things would happen so quickly. However, although it was fast, the team had already stood in place. Thus, after a slight pause, they immediately launched an attack. Some of them carefully listed Ing Juren's daily crimes, some urged him to quickly beg for mercy, and some pretended to press on the swords at their waists. But none of them dared to step forward and capture him. Although this Ing Juren often suffered losses in the hands of Li Yunxin, he was a true master among the secular people. Even if these people had not experienced his methods, they had heard of him. He could split a copper coin with a knife, jump 2 feet high with a knife, break pebbles with one hand, and so on. Until now, although he was standing alone, these people did not ask for trouble. Because they knew about this, Prince Rong must also know about this. Thus, some people secretly looked to both sides. Occasionally, they found an inconspicuous cold metal light behind the screen. Thus, they all knew what the situation was today, so they were not in a hurry. They only cursed and waited for Prince Rong to make a decision. But Ing Juren's reaction was very strange. He did not beg for mercy, nor did he sneer. He did not even say much. Instead, after a pause, he continued to walk forward. But his left hand was leaning on the hilt of his knife, just like how he used to patrol in front of the army. He was dressed in black and was getting closer and closer. Zhou Xian might have been afraid during normal times. But today he had drunk some wine and gained some courage. Secondly, he had a sorcerer and 40 axemen by his side. Therefore, not only was he not afraid, he sneered, "What, you think I can't do anything to you?" After saying this, he first lifted the wine pot and poured the remaining wine into the jade cup. Then he looked coldly at Ing Juren, picked up the jade cup and drank it in one gulp. As the hot wine entered his throat, Ing Juren was already 3 steps away from him. Zhou Xian sneered again and threw the jade cup in front of the table in front of him, just like the old masters in the Qingdu magistrate's office in the past. "Take him down." This voice was full of energy, deafening even the deaf. But the jade cup did not break. The floor of this hall was made of wood. Recently it had been raining for days, so it had already soaked in moisture and was not as strong as before. Moreover, the jade cup in his hand was actually a treasure. It was one of Emperor Yu's favorite cups in the auspicious spring palace. Although it was jade, it was as hard as a rock. In front of him was a kneeling table which was not very high. Just now it was thrown out again. The jade cup rolled on the floor and stopped in front of Ing Juren's feet. For a moment the atmosphere was very awkward. Because what was even more awkward was that the axemen did not move. Zhou Xian was furious. He immediately stood up and picked up his knife, shouting, "Bastard! What are you waiting for? Take him down for me." But there was still no movement. At this moment the voices of the officials in the hall gradually became softer. They saw Ing Juren stop in front of the jade cup. He stared at it for a while, then picked it up. Then he turned his wrist and threw it on the floor. A crisp sound. The jade cup broke into pieces. The smashing of the cup was the signal. The screens on both sides of the hall were suddenly kicked over. 40 armored axemen with sharp blades in their hands rushed out. Zhou Xian sneered, "I think you," but halfway through his laughter his smile froze on his face. Because those executioners didn't swarm towards Ing Juren. Instead they went straight for his trusted aides to kill. The main hall of the auspicious spring palace was very small, and it happened suddenly. Those officials were still thinking about the scene of Ing Juren's knives and axes, and the next moment, how could they imagine that they would be the ones to be killed? After a face-to-face encounter, half of them fell before they could say anything. The remaining half were busy pulling out their swords. Some ran away with their hands over their heads, but it was too late. In just 3 or 4 breaths' time, no matter old or young, fat or skinny, they were all chopped to the ground and turned into corpses. For a moment the smell of blood filled the air, and the blood that flowed out converged into small streams. Zhou Xian was dumbfounded and stood in front of the table for 2 breaths' time. At this moment, Ing Juren walked in front of him. Only then did Zhou Xian react and quickly pulled out his knife. But Ing Juren was faster than him. When his right hand touched the handle of the knife, the black knife that Ing Juren pulled out had already returned to the scabbard at his waist. Zhou Xian suddenly felt a chill on his neck and his mind was in chaos. The next moment, his head suddenly fell from his neck and rolled on the ground. This head that once belonged to Prince Rong fell to the ground, but it was still unsatisfied. Its eyes were wide open and its mouth opened. It was not clear where it got the energy from, but it spat out 3 words, "Such a fast knife." Only then did he lose his life. Ingjuren stretched out his hand and pulled Zhou Xing's body to the side. So the headless body tilted to the side, not letting the blood stain the military map on the table. Then he walked to the table and looked down at the map for a while, then straightened up and looked at the mage of Southernwood House. "Manager Wang, are you done?" The mage of Southernwood House smiled. "Let us comfort the soldiers. But I don't think there will be any changes. The Yulin royal guards in Zhao Xing's hands are just soldiers who eat rations. No matter who Prince Rong is, it will be the same for them. Zai, 2 tigers cannot live on the same mountain. Now that Zhao Xing has been removed, Commandering, it should be Prince Rong, can continue the task that Dragon King entrusted to me." After listening to his words, Ingjuren frowned and thought for a while. "Li Yunxin, Dragon King entrusted me with this task. How come I didn't know about it but you know about it?" The mage, or rather Manager Wang, whom Li Yunxin had met at Southernwood House in City of Wei and then at Southernwood House in Rong City, smiled again. "Not only do I know this, I also know that Hero Ing was subdued by Dragon King in an alley in City of Wei. Then he asked Hero Ing to bring people to City of Wei. Hero Ing is really bold, he really moved the people from Black Stockade Village to City of Wei. But even a person like Dragon King can make a mistake. City of Wei was destroyed. Fortunately, Dragon King made a trip to Rong City in Country of Yu. Hero Ing, why do you think he made such a trip?" Ingjuren frowned again and didn't say anything. The mage of Southernwood House, Manager Wang, who had disguised himself, found him on a rainy night. At that time he and his people had just sought refuge with Zhao Xing. When he saw him he said, "There's a message from Dragon King." At that time, Ingjuren was responsible for the livelihood of thousands of people in Black Stockade Village. In fact, he didn't trust anyone. Li Yunxin promised to help him settle down, but later he couldn't even protect himself and there was no news from him. Only a few strangers intercepted him halfway, saying, "Prince Rong has received the decree of Dragon King to invite heroes to join him in a grand undertaking." After many twists and turns he finally arrived at Rong City and started a muddled rebellion. It was already a muddled account. In the end, Manager Wang told him all about his past. Then he said that the owner of Southernwood House was an ally of Dragon King, and now Dragon King was doing something that would shake the world. As for this side, he asked him to assist Hero Ing in accomplishing another grand undertaking and take care of each other with Dragon King. Chapter 463. Ingjuren only gave him a limited amount of trust. But shopkeeper Wang was not in a hurry, he only took care of him on the way. For any military information he would first report it to him and then to Zhao Xing. The relationship between them gradually became closer until today. He informed him of such a big event and prepared everything in advance. It turned out that the loyal servant, beside Zhao Xing, was Mu Nanju's servant. And the 40 executioners called in by the servant were all elites of Ingjuren's Black Knife army. Zhao Xing set up a trap to kill him, but in fact he had already fallen into Mu Nanju's trap. He probably did not even know how he died. This hero, who was born as a constable, was also a hero of his time. But it was a pity that he was born at the wrong time. After this, Ingjuren carefully looked at shopkeeper Wang from head to toe again. Then he said, "What do you mean? You asked me why Li Yunxin wanted to go to Chengdu. What do you mean? Does it have anything to do with me?" Shopkeeper Wang smiled. At this time the servant had already walked away from them, and ordered the executioners to collect the corpses. Shopkeeper Wang glanced at them and then looked at Ingjuren. "I know that Great Hero Ing doesn't have any clear concept of the Dragon King. In Great Hero Ying's heart, the Dragon King should be a person with magical powers. At the same time he makes promises but he doesn't always keep them. He only uses the people around him as chess pieces, and after using them he might throw them away. For example, asking Master Ing to move the people from the stronghold to Wei City. Great Hero Ing has made this decision after careful consideration and betting his life on it. But Dragon King didn't care about it at all. He left Master Ying's people on the road and disappeared. So Master Ing was quite dissatisfied with him. But he didn't have a good way out, and Li Yunqin was indeed not someone to be trifled with, so he couldn't say it out loud. Am I right? Ingjuren was silent for a while and then snorted, humph. In his eyes we are merely... How could a celestial being like him care about us? How would I dare to resent you? Shopkeeper Wang laughed. So there is indeed a grudge. But Heroing, please listen to me first. He rubbed his hands together, exhaled softly and looked at Ingjuren. That day the reason why the Dragon King came to Chengdu was because he encountered Chengdu's demon cultivator, Daoist wolf. As for that Daoist wolf, he's just a little demon. He hasn't even completed his human form. However, those who had dealt with the Dragon King before were either profound realm experts from the heaven or the profound realm demons in the lake. Those with lower cultivation were either humans or demons of the transcendent state. Any one of them would be a character capable of overseeing a region. Dragon King has seen so many people, but he suddenly became interested in a little demon like Daoist wolf. Not only did you spare his life, you even followed him to Chengdu and stayed for a long time. In my eyes, this is already strange. But what's even weirder is, it's okay that the Dragon King is interested in demons. That Zhou Xian, even in the mortal world, he isn't considered an outstanding person. However, the Dragon King displayed his abilities in front of him twice, telling him to mobilize troops. Why did he do all this? Shopkeeper Wang shook his head. At that time I was observing in secret, thinking about it repeatedly, but I couldn't guess his intentions. I only felt that he had nothing to do, so he wandered around randomly and stopped here to kill time. But that's not the case. At that time his situation wasn't optimistic and he had many things to do, but he spent a lot of effort here. Heroing, why do you think that is? Ingjuren's brows were still furrowed. He blinked his eyes, wanting to say something but stopped. After a moment of silence he shook his head. Impossible. Shopkeeper Wang chuckled. What's impossible? Ingjuren was silent for 3 breaths, then said, you want to say that he stayed in Chengdu for a long time for no reason, but actually he wanted to find a place for me and Lu Gongzan to settle down. This is impossible. Shopkeeper Wang laughed again. It's just a simple thought, so naturally it's impossible. But let me ask Heroing. In the past you gathered a lot of people in the black stronghold of Mount Chiyun. Was it just because you pitted them and wanted to feed them? Ingjuren was stunned. Of course. But Shopkeeper Wang interrupted him. But there are so many pitiful people in the world. Are there no more poor people in the counties near Mount Chiyun? Why didn't Heroing bring them to Mount Chiyun? Ingjuren frowned. Mount Chiyun is barren. It's not easy to maintain a stronghold of 1,000 people. If he brought more people, I'm afraid the old and weak people in the stronghold would starve to death. Moreover, even if there were more people to eat, those young and strong people wouldn't be able to feed them. What do you mean by this? Shopkeeper Wang smiled. Look, when Heroing does something he will think about it, whether it's good for him to do it. If it's good for others but he will be buried in it, smart people won't do it. If Heroing can think this way, won't Dragon King think the same way? Just like Heroing wouldn't specifically take in the old and weak people, Dragon King wouldn't come here just to find a place for you to go. It must be that while planning for you he can also do something for himself. Just like when Heroing takes in those young people into the stronghold, he hopes they can become soldiers to strengthen the stronghold. In fact, it's the same thing. If I put it this way, Heroing might understand Dragon King and think it's possible? Ingjuren's brows furrowed even tighter. After thinking for a while he said in a low voice, even so. After saying this he stopped. After 2 or 3 breaths, he let out a long breath and looked up at Shopkeeper Wang. Really? Shopkeeper Wang smiled sincerely. Of course. Alas. This time Ingjuren sighed again. But it wasn't sorrow in his breath but something else. It was a slight sense of relief. Forget it. Then tell me, what does Dragon King want us to do next? How did you know? Shopkeeper Wang smiled again. Maybe it was his old professional habit, but he loved to smile. However, his smile was not irritating but rather relaxing. He smiled and said, Dragon King stayed in Chengdu for many days to find a place for you to go. The other is what we need to do now, conquer the world. I just said that you should be Prince Rong. I think Dragon King asked you to come here for the same reason. Heroing thought about it. The Dragon King of Wei River's capable general. Why did he become the commander of a mere constable? Could it be that this was arranged by him? Does he look like this kind of person, who would make himself lose face? At first he was called Zhou Xian because he was from Yu and had connections in Qingdu. It was easy for such a person to gain many followers when he did things. If a foreigner came to rebel, people would not follow him, but they would share the same hatred. But now that Rongjun is powerful, he is no longer relying on brotherly feelings to maintain the team at the beginning of the rebellion. What he relies on now is power and glory. Hero Ing already has prestige, so it's reasonable for him to be independent now. No one will object. And what Dragon King wants Hero Ing to do is probably the same as what he did in the city of Wei. Hero Ing, think about it. When he subdued you in the alley, what was the situation in the city of Wei? This time, Ing Juren didn't think too long. He let out a sigh. I remember. At that time, there was a dragon cult in the city of Wei. The cult master was him and he gathered many believers. Shopkeeper Wang said in a low voice, exactly. You are not a cultivator, so I can't tell you in detail what is the use of doing this. But for example, the immortals in the temples are worshipped by people. People like Dragon King will also benefit from being worshipped. At that time there was a dragon cult in the city of Wei. And now, if you get the world of Yu or even more territory in the future when the world is in chaos, just like the Sword Palace in Yu, it's not difficult to establish a national cult and let many people worship the Wei River Dragon King. This is what he wants you to do. The reason why he chose you is that there used to be a Sword Palace in Yu which is similar to a national cult. The people of Yu have long been used to this custom, so it won't be too difficult for them to accept other things. Hearing this, Ing Juren was stunned at first and then became silent. He looked a little absent-minded. Because he used to be just a master. Later he joined the Rong army in Yu and became the commander of the Rong army. This title was impressive, but in fact he didn't feel much. Firstly, the number of soldiers in the Rong army was small, and secondly, many of them were incomplete. They looked no different from farmers. Thirdly, the time was still very short. He didn't have enough time to adapt to the change from the master to the commander. Many changes were obvious in the eyes of outsiders. But it was hard for the people involved to have a clear experience. But now, he who hadn't completely adapted to the role of commander, was told to become Prince Rong. To become Prince Rong, he knew what he had to do, he just had to continue doing what he was doing now. Raise troops, fight and win. Kill all the way to the capital. But he still hadn't thought about what to do when he reached the capital. Zhao Xing thought he had disloyal intentions. But in fact, until he killed Zhao Xing today, he didn't have such thoughts. Even when he thought about what to do after attacking the capital, he would feel slightly relieved because, at that time, it would be Zhao Xing's business. But after that he decided that he needed to do it. He had never had the experience of rebelling, and thinking of this already made him feel a little nervous. But this wasn't the end. Manager Wang actually said something like, obtaining a bigger territory. Could it be that obtaining you was not enough and he still had to kill his way out? Thinking of this, he grasped the hilt of his saber. Bigger territory. Manager Wang. You told me before that we should act as soon as possible and that we should do it in one go. Because we were worried that the immortals of Daotong and Kenzo would interfere. Then the so-called bigger territory. Manager Wang laughed. Don't tell me you still haven't realized? Troubled times have already come. I mean really troubled times. Troubled times where demons and heroes rise together. Troubled times where hundreds of thousands, millions or even tens of millions of people kill each other. Troubled times where blood flows and corpses are strewn everywhere and heaven and earth are about to be cut apart. Chapter 464. Shopkeeper Wang was still smiling, but his smile had turned cold and his tone had turned sharp. It was the first time Ing Juren had seen him like this. He subconsciously gripped the hilt of his knife again. What do you mean? Shopkeeper Wang sighed and paused for a moment. He paused as if he was thinking about where to start. But after thinking for a while he only said, to talk about this, Master Ing needs to know something else first. For example, who is the real ruler of this world? Is it the emperors of the human world or the cultivators of Daotong and Kenzo? Ing Juren thought for a moment. I don't know much about the gods. But since you asked and I have seen the methods of the immortals, it should be the immortals. Shopkeeper Wang chuckled. Hey, you are only half right. For example, in the Qin kingdom, the rulers on the surface are the government and the court. But in the dark there are guilds, gangs, and strongholds. The government and the court are like the immortals of Xianmen. And on the other side, mastering should know that there are demons. Demons are very rare for ordinary people, but they are very common. Hero Ing should be able to understand this. Ing Juren naturally knew this. He had stayed in Li Yunxin's Dragon Palace and Ziwei Palace on Mount Jun. He had seen demons with his own eyes. That Li Yunxin called himself the Wei River Dragon King. Wasn't he also a demon? It seemed that he was a famous demon. He thought of the Dragon King Temple, the Mountain God Temple, the Earth God Temple, and all kinds of temples he had seen in the past. He used to think that what people worshipped were real gods. But these days, after seeing more and knowing more, he realized they had been worshipping demons. There were so many fiendish demons hiding among the humans. Thinking of this, he felt a slight chill. He didn't know where the fear in his heart came from, and he couldn't tell what it was. Seeing him like this, shopkeeper Wang nodded and continued, "Master Ing, you should know that the real rulers of the world are cultivators and demons. The two have been balancing each other for tens of thousands of years. Demons are cruel by nature, and if no one restrains them, they will bring chaos to the world. And the Xianmen have the responsibility of shepherding the people, so they don't dare to be too arrogant to avoid an all-out war. Hero Ing, you should also know that when the commoners of the mortal world worship the incarnation of a fiendish demon, they can provide the fiendish demon with incense and power of will. For example, your Wei River Dragon King. The more people worshipped him, the more powerful his demon power is. However, in the previous situation of mutual checks and balances, although the great demons could perform miracles to confuse the people, once they did so, they would face the crazy encirclement of the cultivators of the celestial sect. As a result, the great fiendish demons mostly live in seclusion deep in the mountains or in the city. Instead, it's the lesser demons that cultivators don't think much of that frequently appear. These little demons that are showing their divinity will also do some small good deeds, so the Daoist sect of Xian will turn a blind eye to them." Hearing this, Ing Juren was stunned. Then Li Yunxin is a demon? Shopkeeper Wang laughed. "Huh. Your Wei River Dragon King is a demon among the demons. When I said demons hide, I was talking about ordinary demons. Your Dragon King is the royal family of demons. Dragons control 7 parts of the world's water. The Shinryu King that people worship refers to as the dragons." Ing Juren let out another the expression on his face becoming slightly complicated. Actually, he couldn't tell if it was gratification or jealousy, or if it was a lot of other emotions that were tangled together. He thought for a while, then asked, "Then, what happened?" Shopkeeper Wang took a deep breath and looked up. Actually, there was only a dark dome above him. He couldn't see anything. But his gaze seemed to pass through the roof of the palace, to see the outside world, to see the distant future. "Then, it will be the unprecedented chaotic era that I told you about. Everything will change. The Xianmen will fall apart and demons will appear in the world. At that time, many demons that were afraid of Daotong's power and went into seclusion will want to obtain more power of faith. And the power of faith is divided into 2 kinds. One is people's faith, worship from the bottom of their hearts, from respect and love. This kind is very rare. The demons have to satisfy them, please them, and guide them. No matter who it is, it's a very troublesome thing. The other kind is, it's very simple. It's fear. It's even easier to do. The demons will appear and start a massacre. Their fierce name will quickly spread and they will quickly obtain a lot of power of faith. Once the chaos comes, the demons will choose the latter." When he said this, his voice became slightly lower. As if he could see the terrible and miserable scene of the future, every word he said was very heavy. "The demons will fight to be the first to build their own demon kingdom. They don't need an emperor, they themselves will be the emperor and gods of the mortal world. They will carry out a terrifying and bloody rule, squeezing everyone's flesh and spirit as much as possible. This situation will continue for a long time. Until more and more mortals die and the world becomes more and more withered. The demons will realize that what they are doing is no different from killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. The cultivators among the mortals can use their own power to cultivate. If the demons want to grow, they have to rely on mortals. And once the number of mortals drops to a certain level, they will find it hard to advance. and will turn to killing each other to fight for resources. It's also at this time that they will realize that the methods of the Xian men in the past, the methods now are the best. Shopkeeper Wang looked at Ying Juren meaningfully. There is a mortal as the emperor, becoming the demon's agent in the mortal world. And the demons will protect the people for this emperor, letting them live and work in peace and contentment. For this, the people will be grateful to the emperor, worship the guardian, and the number will also increase. This is a good cycle that can be repeated over and over again. The demons will eventually realize this, but by that time a long time will have passed. And, if before everything starts someone has already started to do this, think about it. At that time how terrible an advantage will he have? Ying Juren opened his mouth, feeling that his lips were a little dry. Even without shopkeeper Wang's gaze he felt that he knew what Li Yunxin wanted him to do. Li Yunxin is a big demon, he wants me to become the agent. This thought made Ying Juren frown. If the idea of becoming an emperor was too far-fetched for him, then this only made him feel that it was ridiculous. Right now, they were by the Rhone River. Inside the palace, there were many powerful empires in the world, with millions and tens of millions of elite soldiers, and everywhere there were Xianmen garrisons and immortals with profound cultivation. All of this could be seen and touched, but this wizard Mu Nanju in front of him described to him a terrible and ferocious scene that happened in the future. He could not imagine it at all. However, shopkeeper Wang's tone was so firm, his expression so solemn, it was hard for him to think that this person was exaggerating or trying to scare him. Because of this strange contradictory feeling, Ying Juren took a deep breath and said in a low voice, "Enough. Black Blade Ying Juren Humph will never be a puppet. My blade, my blade. I only do what I want to do." After saying this he paused and frowned. "How do you know these things? You said you are from Mu Nanju. Why do you care so much about Li Yunxin? You told me before that people always have their own selfish motives. So what do you want?" Shopkeeper Wang smiled. "We are allies with the Dragon King. When I was in Qingdu I met the Dragon King, we got along very well. Right now the Dragon King is on Mount Yunshan and is about to do something big, so it is not convenient for him to contact you. Therefore we will convey the message on his behalf. As for what we want," shopkeeper Wang smiled, "we just want a better world. Hero Ying is now slowly beginning to understand the true face of this world. When Hero Ying knows more he will have the same thoughts as us. In a better world everyone will benefit. It is done over there." After saying this he pointed to the hall. The bloodstains in the hall had been cleaned up and the warriors stood on two sides. A servant stood in front of the door and turned to look at the two of them. Shopkeeper Wang approached Ying Juren. "Prince Rong, it is your job now." Ying Juren held the hilt of his blade tightly, his brows knitted together. After thinking for almost a quarter of an hour, he seemed to have finally made up his mind. "Open the door." The servant glanced at shopkeeper Wang again and opened the hall door. The light from outside shone in and Ying Juren took a step forward. Jinghua. Qian Hall. Qian Hall had always been the study of the Qing Emperor. But after the Qing Emperor ascended the throne, he did not like to go to the back palace and often spent the night in Qian Hall. Now Qian Hall was the study of the emperor and also the emperor's bedchamber. In the past few hundred years the number of people serving in Qian Hall was around 60. But this time the number had expanded to 200. It was just past 5 in the morning. Because it was already late autumn, the sky was not yet bright. Usually the emperor would be up at this time, he would be washing up and changing clothes. In another hour there would be a meal and then court. Privately it was said that the current emperor was the most diligent ruler in the world. Since he ascended the throne at the age of 28, he had not been lazy for a single day. The emperor was diligent, so the people serving him had to be even more diligent. Usually at this time there were people coming and going near Qian Hall. It could be said to be an endless stream. Some were the emperor's attendants, and others were the attendants of the concubines who were spending the night there. Lanterns of all sizes were lit. People came and went in an orderly fashion. It looked like a portrayal of the Qing kingdom's prosperity, people's strength and peace. However, on this late autumn morning, it was so quiet in front of Qian Hall that one could hear a pin drop to the ground. It was not that there was no one. On the contrary, all of the attendants in Qian Hall, 200 of them, knelt from the Qing Emperor's bedchamber all the way to the white jade square in front of the hall. They all lowered their bodies, lowered their heads and slowed their breathing. It was as if any heavy breathing would bring disaster. The cause was, after the Qing emperor woke up early, he suddenly sat by the bed in a daze and didn't speak. At this point it had already been almost an hour. Chapter 465. The emperor's closest attendant, Yuanhua, knelt at the very front. Similarly, he did not dare raise his head. His eyes were only fixed on the Qing emperor's feet. His feet were bare, and when he stepped on the thick and soft lamb skin in front of the couch, he sank halfway into it. Yuanhua stared at the foot and thought to himself, "It's late autumn and the weather is dry." But the earth dragons in the palace were burning fiercely. Perhaps the emperor was on fire. Now that there was a fire and he was stepping on the lambskin barefoot, it was not good for his health. When the emperor's mood improved, he would first instruct the kitchen to prepare a bowl of flowering jade porridge. He was not like the nearly 200 people behind him, nervously guessing why the Qing emperor had suddenly fallen silent. Because this wasn't the first time he had been like this. Ever since Daoist Xianxia left the capital. It was just that this time it was seen by everyone. Furthermore, the emperor was a benevolent person and would never vent his anger on the people around him for no reason. But it seemed that because of this time he suddenly seemed to be throwing a tantrum, almost scaring everyone to death. Kneeling beside the emperor was concubine Ming, who had served him last night. Concubine Ming's surname was Lu, and her ancestor was actually a distant relative of the emperor. The Qing emperor did not have many concubines. There were no more than 8 famous people. 1 empress, 1 imperial concubine and 6 imperial concubines. Among the 8, concubine Ming was the only one favored by the emperor. Although she had not given birth to a child in the past 6 years, the emperor's favor had not decreased. Almost every 2 or 3 days she would come to serve him in bed and no one could steal her limelight. But in fact, concubine Ming was a gentle and obedient person who didn't speak much. She was inferior to the other 7 in terms of both knowledge and appearance. No one could understand why she was so favored. However, Yuanhua was aware of this. Concubine Ming knelt beside the emperor. Yuanhua raised his eyes slightly and could see the side of concubine Ming's face. At this moment she did not have the time to dress up. Her beautiful black hair hung on the right side of her body. The left side of her neck and earlobes were all exposed to Yuanhua's gaze. Therefore he could see a strand of curly hair behind concubine Ming's ear. It looked like a small hook. The people of Clearwater had them too. Another quarter of an hour passed. Then the Qing emperor's hand finally moved. It had been resting on his lap with his head slightly lowered in deep thought. At this moment he raised his right hand and picked up something from his knee. The emperor had moved. The others did not dare to look, but concubine Ming and Yuanhua did. They finally saw what it was. It was a white hair. The emperor's undergarments were white and his white hair fell on his knees. Naturally they couldn't see him clearly. Now that he saw this thing he was stunned for a moment. Just because of this thing, he sat quietly for almost an hour. The Qing emperor twirled the white hair between his fingers and looked at it silently for a while. Suddenly he sighed gently. "I am old." The emperor was 35 years old this year. He was actually in the prime of his life. He also practiced some body-strengthening techniques passed down by immortals and ate well. A person in his mid-20s in the marketplace would only look like the Qing emperor. But everyone was afraid of getting old, especially the emperor. Now that he had finally seen the first strand of his hair turn white, he could only sigh with emotion. Hearing the Qing emperor's words, everyone let out a breath. So it was because of this. Yuanhua and concubine Ming planned to say something. Whether it was something like, "It's all because the emperor overworks himself. It's fine as long as he takes good care of himself." Or something like, "At the emperor's age, how can he be considered old? Some children in their teens have white hair." They could all make the Qing emperor feel at ease. Just as the words reached their mouths, their expressions suddenly changed. 2 drops of tears suddenly fell from the Qing emperor's eyes. Since the first time the current emperor cried when he was born, no one had ever seen him cry. Even if the previous emperor died. Yuanhua only froze for a moment before he quickly waved his hand behind him. The people behind him understood and rose in succession. Fearfully lowering their heads and bowing their backs, they quickly retreated out of the hall and closed the door. Concubine Ming was also stunned. She looked at Yuanhua as if asking for help. The old chamberlain thought for a moment and also gave her a meaningful glance. Concubine Ming hesitated for a moment. Gritting her teeth, she tentatively placed her hand on the Qing emperor's leg. The Qing emperor didn't look at her, but 2 more drops of tears fell. I am already old. Concubine Ming withdrew her hand. She also rose and also slowly left the hall. Inside the room there was only a master and a servant. After a dozen breaths, the Qing emperor stood. He tossed aside his white hair and walked around the room with his hands behind his back. Then he faced the window with his back to Yunequa and asked, "Say, how much longer do you think I can live?" Normally, a chamberlain would say that the emperor would live for 1,000 years. Yunequa thought for a moment and also stood up. As he took out a large cloak, he walked behind the Qing emperor and draped it over him. In a quiet voice he said, "Your Majesty is 35 this year. If there are no changes, you should have 30 more years. If heaven is watching, perhaps there are 40 or 50 more. But any more would not be the work of man." The Qing emperor's tears fell again. However, his voice was as neutral and calm as usual. "I have all the rare treasures in the country, yet I can only watch myself grow old like a normal person. I cannot accept this." Yunequa was speechless. In reality, he knew why the emperor was crying. In the past he had also known, but he did not think it would reach such a stage. It was because of Qingshui Man. Qingshui Man had lived for many years. In the foreseeable future she would live for many more years. But when she left the capital, she told the emperor that she was going to do one thing and would never see him again. Perhaps Qingshui Man's one thing was truly just one thing for her, such as a normal person visiting friends and family or taking the imperial examinations. He would be gone for months, a year. But for Daoist Qingshui, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years in fact could be considered as a snap of the fingers. But the emperor could not wait until then. Separation in life and death were both very cruel, but there was another thing that was even crueler. You could love someone with all your heart and life, but to her, you were just a fleeting passerby. He was silent. After a while he heard the emperor ask again, "Where is Fu Bonan?" Yunequa thought for a bit and then said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, news came last night. Sir Fu has died in office." The Qing emperor abruptly turned his head. His eyes were still wet, but his brows were tightly furrowed. "What did you say?" "Sir Fu was ordered by Your Majesty to investigate the matter of the Ghost Emperor," Yunequa said calmly in a low voice. "He had just arrived at our camp when an immortal from the Kenzhou also went. Without any explanation he wanted to kill Ding Min, Su Mao and the other witnesses. He also killed Sir Fu earlier. After that, Li Yunxin appeared in the camp and fought a great battle with another Kenzhou master, Jin Guangzi. The 2 of them were powerful and affected everything within a radius of several li. Not only did Sir Fu die in the line of duty, but thousands of soldiers in our camp also died. This matter has gradually spread throughout the Allied army. By tomorrow at the latest, I think all the emperors will know of this matter." The Qing emperor gritted his teeth. After a moment of silence he said, "What do you think?" "In my opinion," Yunequa said with a heavy expression, "we have heard of the matter of the Ghost Emperor before. But we only thought it was a rumor spread by ignorant commoners. Now that our soldiers have personally seen it, the credibility is high. After that, an immortal from the Xianmen went to our camp to kill people. Your Majesty, right now the Xianmen are in need of people. Unless something extraordinary happens, there is no reason for them to kill their allies. Yet they did so. It means they don't want this matter to spread. It also means it should be true." The Qing emperor's breathing sped up slightly. He was silent for a moment and then said in a low voice, "You also believe it to be true?" He then took a deep breath. Li Yunxin. Li Yunxin again. What happened after that? What was the result of the battle between Li Yunxin and Jin Guangzi? Apparently Jin Guangzi was killed. Li Yunxin was taken to Yunshan. Good kill. The Qing emperor snorted. This cultivator is too arrogant. The battle is imminent. He ran to my camp to kill people." His expression quickly dimmed again. It seemed to be because of the name Li Yunxin. The emperor knew about Li Yunxin. Before Taoist Qingshui left, he had said he wanted to see how far Li Yunxin could go. It was also from then on that the emperor began to pay special attention to this person. Only now did he realize that this person was powerful to this extent. He dared to kill people outside the camps of Daotong and Kenzo. Wasn't Jin Guangzi a cultivator of the true realm? The emperor quickly let out a breath. He had once asked to see a cultivator at the pinnacle of the true realm but couldn't. What kind of existence was a cultivator of the true realm and a sect leader? In the hearts of the people she must be like a god. Li Yunqing killed her? The emperor tried to think of the magnificent and terrifying scene. But he couldn't think of it. Taoist Qingshui left for this young man. The emperor's heart clenched. He closed his eyes and let out a light breath. Eunuch Hua stayed silent with him. It wasn't until the sky outside the window gradually brightened that the Qing emperor opened his eyes again. How is Zhao Zheng? Zhao Zheng, the heavenly official of the Ministry of Personnel, could be considered a veteran of 2 dynasties. There had always been a rebellious saying in the Qing kingdom. It said that the world now belonged to the Zhao family. He was referring to the Zhao clan, which was led by Zhao Zheng and his subordinates. The group of civil officials formed by these people held the majority of the power in the court, and could almost stand up to the emperor. Eunuch Hua said, "Your servant has made the necessary arrangements." The number of officials who were dissatisfied with Zhao Zheng's domineering ways was actually more than one could imagine. In the past, it was only because His Majesty did not want to care about these things that he could only endure. Now that His Majesty wanted to make a move, everyone would naturally respond to his call. Zhao Zheng, a clown. Your Majesty, give the order immediately. Tomorrow this old servant will present his head to you. This will ensure the stability of the court. The Qing emperor thought for a moment and suddenly said, "Have the crown prince do this." Eunuch Hua was stunned. "Crown prince? Your Majesty, I am already 18, the Qing emperor said calmly. When I was 18 I was already handling government affairs for the previous emperor. Now it was time for him to train. If he did well, I can rest assured in handing this world to him. He is tolerant and honest. He will be a good emperor." The Qing emperor sighed gently. He will not have another Taoist Qingshui by his side. Eunuch Hua thought through the Qing emperor's words and suddenly paused. "Your Majesty, fate is up to me, not the heavens. I have already made up my mind." The Qing emperor looked darkly at the similarly dark sky outside the window. A mortal emperor is still a mortal. If he cannot live forever, what is the difference between the remaining 30 years of life and the remaining 3 days of life? Chapter 466. It was now the 4th day since Li Yunqing had been imprisoned on the floating mountain. The sky was as bright as ever, like the sun in summer. Now he had rolled up the curtains and doors and was lying on a bamboo couch by the door. From this angle he could see the entire courtyard. The courtyard was very wide and in fact it was like a small garden. The outermost edge was surrounded by many lush locust trees, forming a wall of trees. The locust trees here were the thickest ones Li Yunqing had ever seen. Even a branch that stuck out was as thick as a person's arms. Today the locust flowers were blooming out of season, and the fragrance of the flowers was strong and filled the air. Further inside was a large expanse of green grass, dotted with scattered stones. Li Yunqing liked this kind of scenery and it seemed that the previous owner also liked it. But it was obviously not the aesthetic of this world. In fact, many gardens on the floating mountain were all about winding paths, hazy and reserved. Such a large expanse of unbridled green, such a strong and brilliant fragrance, were in fact not meant for humans. Further inside the grass was the flowing water. The water was clear and shallow with pebbles, grass and faintly discernible fish. This was something that the people of this world liked and it was a beautiful combination here. Then further inside was the wooden platform outside the study. If Li Yunqing could walk out it would be best to set the bamboo couch on the wooden platform. But now Li Yunqing's mind was not on these scenery. He was lying down idly but he had nothing to do. In fact he wanted to do a lot of things but he couldn't go out. So he thought, what the hell is Black Yanjun up to? He had another purpose in coming to the cloudy mountain. That was, if one day he really reached a desperate situation and his life was really over, what would Black Yanjun do? Li Yunqing also wanted to figure out another problem. That was, whether the two of them suddenly went into seclusion on purpose, but were still observing in secret, or whether they really had no choice but to ignore the affairs of the living world. The difference between the two was huge and it would have a huge impact on many of the things he would do next. He had to get to the bottom of this problem before he could come up with other ideas. Before he went to Evil King's Pitfall Mountain, he had always thought that Black Bai Yanjun might just be helping him out for fun, and he had the attitude of let's see how far I can go. But after that time, Bai Yanjun brought him to a forbidden room in the dark Azura Hall. They also said some strange things as if they were saying that Li Yunxin was the person they had chosen, and there had been such a person before. From this point on, Li Yunxin knew that he was not a chess piece that could be abandoned at any time to Black Bai Yanjun. But now, it had been a long time since he had seen them. In the past, whenever Li Yunxin was in danger, Bai Yanjun would appear. They would either provide some information or make some requests. But this time, regardless of whether it was Li Yunxin being struck by lightning at Mount Jun, being surrounded in Changji town, going to Hatred's palace, going to the Qing army's camp, and now being imprisoned by a fake saint, Bai Yanjun had never appeared again. If they had felt that the situation was not dangerous before and that Li Yunxin had left some leeway, then what about this time? Perhaps this meant that the first possibility had been erased. Black Bai Yanjun was not actively avoiding the world. They had a compelling reason for being unable to come to this world. Perhaps it was a hasty judgment to make such a judgment based on the fact that Li Yunxin was about to die, but they did not show themselves. But at least one thing was certain. This time he truly had to rely on himself. He had placed himself in an extremely dangerous situation and finally confirmed this conclusion. Thus, Li Yunxin sighed and closed his eyes again. He had nothing else to do these days, so he could only do one thing: cultivation. He had never been so focused on cultivation without any distractions. Although he had handed over many of his belongings with his genius mind, he had already memorized most of the contents when he was flipping through those books. Now he used the memories in his heart to organize the many scattered pieces and could cultivate for a period of time. Although he still lacked many things, it was no longer the situation of building castles in the air in the past. Now he was laying the foundation. Although this foundation could not be completely laid in a short time, the rest could be added later. Actually, it would be good if he could obtain the martial methods in the hands of the painting Taoist priests on Yunshan that Zhou Xian spoke of. Thinking of this, he opened his eyes slightly. Sunlight seeped in and for a moment his vision became a bit dizzy. Li Yunxin's gaze wandered back and forth among the dense locust trees on the outskirts. Very quickly he found what he was looking for. It was a ribbon hanging from one corner. The owner of the ribbon should be hiding among the leaves and flowers on the slanting branches. It had been like this for the past few days. Today was also the fourth day. Little girl. Li Yunxin huffed softly in his heart. He knew that it was Xianxia. On the way to Yunshan, Xianxia said that there was a triple spy among the painting Taoist priests. Now it seemed that she was talking about herself. Perhaps the original owner of this body was really a spy of Mu Nanju. But later she was seen through and possessed by the wandering souls of the Freemasonry. Along the way, Li Yunxin carefully studied her expression and did not notice anything unusual. Now that he thought about it, perhaps it was because he had rehearsed it a long time ago. He had long prepared a set of expressions and words. While talking to him, he was careful and focused on the performance. Perhaps he could achieve that kind of effect in a short period of time. It was just that this possessed wandering soul was also interesting. Most of the wandering souls that Li Yunxin had seen in the past had lived for a long time and were crazy. However, Su Yusong, Zhuamuxia and Xianxia were very normal. Xianxia was a wandering soul. What kind of wandering soul was she? It had actually been captured by Li Yunxin. For days ago her heart was hurt again. She wanted to stab him with a sword, but there was nothing she could do, so she ran away crying. However, from the next day onwards she hid in the tree and watched Li Yunxin's movements from afar. Wasn't this the behavior of a little girl? Could it be that this wandering soul was originally a little girl and that was why she had such thoughts? For example, although her heart was hurt, she still loved him deeply. She hated him but couldn't let him go, so she hid and watched from afar. Perhaps she was even crying as she watched. Thinking of this, Li Yunxin let out a laugh. But soon, he was stunned again. Because a thought suddenly appeared in his mind. Before this, he felt strange and contradictory because Xianxia was acting like a naive and inexperienced little girl at this time, but when she came to talk to him she disguised herself very well. If someone was scheming enough to deceive Li Yunxin, she would definitely not be an inexperienced little girl. This was the contradiction. However, the new thought in his mind was, what if her body was also Xianxia, and the wandering soul was also Xianxia? Because Li Yunqin saw the way Su Yusong and Zhuamuxia treated her. It was very much like how they treated their little daughter. If she was some unrelated wandering soul or some simple junior sister, the relationship between the three of them would be extremely strange. But when the three of them got along, it was extremely natural, as if they were really a family, as if Xianxia was really raised by them. Previously, at the foot of the floating mountain, Su Xing had told Li Yunqin about the past of these two wandering souls. He said that these two were actually husband and wife in the past. Before they became wandering souls, they were husband and wife. After becoming wandering souls, they always addressed each other as husband and wife. The two had a daughter whose nickname was Yiqiong, but unfortunately she died at an early age. After becoming wandering souls, the two of them were obsessed with this. Therefore, they were the most gentle and normal two of the many wandering souls in the Freemasonry. If these two wandering souls had first extracted Xianxia's soul, she would not have been able to escape. Then they would have refined the extracted soul into a wandering soul and stuffed it back. In this way, they could be considered the real person but also not the real person. This could explain the strangeness in Li Yunqin's intuition, right? The various words spoken on the way to Cloud Mountain were both said by the wandering souls and indeed by Xianxia. Naturally, there were no major flaws. Although she was a wandering soul, she was essentially just a little girl with an obsession. All kinds of womanly behavior could be easily explained. If this was really the case, Su Yusong and Zhuamuxia really knew how to play. It was obvious that he had created a child for himself. Moreover, it was a child who lived a long life and could really enjoy the happiness of a family forever. Thinking of this, Li Yunqin frowned and sighed in his heart. He had miscalculated. For days ago, he had made a wrong move. Until he was captured by Su Yusong and Zhuamuxia in this house, he was still not very sure of Xianxia's identity. However, if Xianxia was a wandering soul of the Freemasonry, it was not a big deal for him to betray her. If Xianxia was indeed a spy of Munanju, then she must have long considered the extreme situation of, once her identity was exposed, after hiding in Cloud Mountain for so long. At that time he only betrayed her to escape with the help of his allies. At that time he was faced with a life and death situation, and Xianxia had much more room to maneuver than he did. The only thing he did not expect was the current level. She was neither Xianxia nor... Damn it. If he had guessed this earlier, he would have given it a try. He would not have betrayed her immediately. He would have had to go through a lot of torture and humiliation, and in the end he would rather die than submit, forcing the little girl to jump out and put on a show of a loving woman bravely saving her husband. In this case, this Xianxia was still useful. His thoughts stopped here, and when he raised his eyes to look at the locust tree again, his belt had disappeared. Li Yunqin sighed again and got up from the bamboo couch. He had been meditating for nearly 4 hours. Overdoing it would consume his energy. It was time to do something else and change his mind. For example, he counted the number of hairs on the head of the third woman on the left in the Music in the Cool Palace painting. However, as soon as he got up, an oiled paper bag hit him. It fell on the bamboo couch and bounced to the ground. Li Yunqin turned his face. He did not know when Xianxia had turned to the west corridor. Perhaps the restriction in this house also blocked his perception, so he did not notice her like an ordinary person. Now that he saw it, he found that she was staring at him angrily with her eyebrows raised, as if she was questioning him. Chapter 467. Li Yunqin looked at the paper bag on the ground again. When he was about to pick it up, he thought of something. So he just looked at her calmly. They looked at each other for a while. Li Yunqin frowned. Xianxia blinked her eyes and was a little stunned. Because she didn't expect that Li Yunqin would have such an attitude. 4 days ago in this very room, he had sold himself without the slightest bit of integrity or hesitation. Now she came to see him again after 4 days. He didn't flatter her, nor did he apologize. There was not even a trace of fear or guilt on his face. He just said, indifferently, as if he didn't know why she was angry and why she came to see him. He said, Xianxia was a little dazed after being stunned for a while. It seemed that she saw Li Yunqin again that night. He told her some old things in a low voice and hid the sadness in his heart with a faint smile on his face. That was the person she wanted. Now he seemed to have become that person again. This thought turned around in her mind and then she came to her senses. At this time she saw Li Yunxin turned around and was about to walk into the room. He seemed to be impatient because she didn't talk. Xianxia frowned again when she saw his indifferent attitude. She stared at him. Li Yunxin. Li Yunxin turned around again and said, again. Xianxia bit her lips and breathed twice angrily, as if she had swallowed all the words of reprimand and complaints. Finally she just said, "Why don't you see what's inside?" Li Yunxin looked down at the paper bag on the ground and was silent for a moment. Xianxia didn't know why, but she was also worried. She didn't feel relieved until Li Yunxin really turned around, walked 2 steps back and bent down to pick up the paper bag. Then she saw Li Yunxin holding the thing in his hand and slowly opening it. It was a roasted chicken. It was not strange for a roasted chicken to appear anywhere, but it was strange for it to appear in Mount Shaoyun. Whether it was Su Yusong, Zhuamuja, Xianxia or Li Yunxin, all of them could live on the energy of heaven and earth without eating grains. But now that he was imprisoned, the little demon girl had sent him such a gift. Li Yunxin was indeed surprised. He looked up, this time sincerely, and uttered a puzzled for the 3rd time. Xianxia glared at him. "Aren't you hungry?" Li Yunxin stared at her for 2 breaths of time, trying to figure out what she was trying to do. However, he soon realized what was going on. For the past few days he had been basking in the sun, half lying on the bamboo couch, basking in the sun while recalling the fragmented martial arts he had memorized before, secretly cultivating. Because of this, when there was plenty of time, one's thoughts would wander, and one would think of many things of the past as well as some memorable stories. For example, there was a book called Shuo Xinyu, that in a dynasty called Jin, there was a general named He Long. When the weather was sunny, people would take out their own books to dry to prevent mold and insects, but he would also lie in the sun with his clothes open. When people asked him what he was doing, he would say that he was also drying books, the books hidden in his stomach. Didn't he look very similar to him now? Those books with words and pictures were taken away, but the contents were hidden in his stomach. Now that he thought about it slowly under the sun, it was a different approach to achieve the same result. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but touch his belly. It was just an unconscious movement. For a few days he would think of this story and do the same thing. Xianxia probably noticed this. For days ago she was so angry and wronged that she wanted to kill someone. But after 4 days her anger gradually subsided. She was overwhelmed with sadness. She wanted to find an opportunity to tell herself that her sadness was groundless, and that Li Yunxin might have his own difficulties. This behavior was similar to many infatuated people in the secular world. She first deceived herself in despair, and then gave herself to others to be deceived. Her heart softened in the end. She thought of Li Yunxin. He used to be the Wei River Dragon King, a peerless demon. In the face of dangerous situations he came up with many ingenious strategies and saved himself from danger again and again. When it came to martial arts he was brave and fearless. With the cultivation of the true state he even killed the golden light with a Daoist artifact. Such a hero was now imprisoned in a small house, and was going to die soon. Moreover, she knew about Li Yunxin's past before she brought him to Yunshan. Xianxia remembered one of his hobbies very clearly. That was because Li Yunxin's hobby was very strange in her eyes. Li Yunxin loved delicious food. Logically speaking, cultivators would not care about fine wine and delicacies. However, Li Yunxin was a great demon that did not need the 5 grains. What was good was not human flesh and blood, but the food of the mortal world. This had always made her feel interesting, and because of it, Wei River Dragon King's image became more intimate. Then, on the first day when she saw Li Yunxin's action, she didn't notice it. At that time her heart was still occupied by anger and resentment, and she only wanted to see his miserable appearance. Unexpectedly she didn't see his miserable appearance, but saw a leisurely person. So she was puzzled. Why was he so different from the person yesterday? On the 2nd day she saw this action again. On the 3rd day she saw this action again. So she slowly realized that maybe he was greedy. After all, she had only been a wandering soul for a short time, and she hadn't been a human for a long time. As a human, she knew many things and many joys. Probably more than ordinary cultivators, demons and wandering souls. She could understand Li Yunxin's feelings. So after leaving Mount Shaoyun, she went to the mortals in the mountain and brought this thing. Now that Li Yunxin saw this, he thought for a while and guessed the whole story. He held the oil paper in his hand and stared at it for a while. For a while both of them were silent. After a while Xianxia bit her lip. "What are you looking at?" Her tone was a little unruly, as if she was angry because her husband didn't understand, or blaming. Because she saw the look in Li Yunxin's eyes. Obviously he was a little emotional and a little stunned. Of course he didn't expect that she would do this. Xianxia sighed sadly and felt moved in her heart, feeling sorry for her own feelings. But the next moment the roast chicken rolled to the ground. She could throw things in, but Li Yunxin couldn't throw things out. So he just threw the thing in his palm to the ground. The delicious food rolled and was covered with a layer of dust. Xianxia was stunned and didn't know what to say for a while. But Li Yunxin had already turned around, looked at her sideways and frowned. "You don't have to worry about it. In the future Miss Xan don't come." Xianxia opened her mouth and finally became angry. "Li Yunxin. You're a bastard." As she spoke, her tears fell again. The hope that she had slowly cultivated in her heart these days was shattered because of his actions just now. The deep sadness was stronger than the anger. She cried and said, "Who are you?" "As if you weren't like this a few days ago. You weren't like this 4 days ago either. You're also not like this 4 days ago. Who the hell are you? Who the hell are you?" She cried but didn't leave. Her body was full of the fragrance of locust flowers. In fact, they didn't know how long they had been sitting in the tree. A series of questions came out of her mouth, which made Li Yunxin stop again. So, Li Yunxin stood silently in the shadow of the house, while Xianxia stood in the sunlight outside the house. Both of them seemed to be in a gloomy mood, at least it seemed so. Xianxia cried for a while, but suddenly wiped her tears and gritted her teeth. "Well, since you're such a person, I'll let you have a taste of pain. Li Yunxin, do you know? I've caught Bai Yunxin and Hong Yangzi." After listening to her words, Li Yunxin still didn't say anything. But in the end he slowly turned around and looked at her. Xianxia bit her lips. She wiped away the tears on her face with her palm and said, "You see, I'll destroy Bai Yunxin's cultivation and make her my mount. Hong Yangzi. I'll beat her back to her original form and steam her for you. Let's see if you can still be embarrassed." She stopped crying after saying this. She just stared at Li Yunxin with her red eyes. After more than 10 breaths, Li Yunxin suddenly sighed. "Don't be silly." The little demon girl was stunned again. She hadn't expected Li Yunxin's reaction today, including this time. He was still not angry, nor was he timid. Instead he said such a sentence and his tone was very helpless. After sighing, Li Yunxin took 2 steps forward. He was only 2 steps away from Xianxia, but there was an insurmountable barrier between them. "I'll assume that what you said is true," he said in a low voice with no expression on his face. "You really caught them. But it's also something that those 2 sent people to do for you. But they've been caught and brought to Yunshan. Is it something that you can deal with?" Xianxia gritted her teeth. "Of course. Senior brother promised me." Li Yunxin shook his head gently. "I guess you asked your senior brother and sister to catch them because you want to vent your anger. But it's unlikely that they agreed just because you're unhappy. Xianxia, you should know who Bai Yunxin's adoptive father is and what's on Hong Yangzi's body. Compared to the Golden Rock King, I'm just a small figure. But they still spent a lot of effort to deal with me. As for the Golden Rock King, do they not care? And the reason why they did what you wanted is not because they spoil you unconditionally, but because they also want Bai Yunxin and Hong Yangzi. As for why they want Bai Yunxin, I can't say. But as for why they want Hong Yangzi, I guess it's because of the dragon soul in her body. It's just that this time you happened to mention it, so I let you do it." Li Yunxin spoke at a steady pace, but his breath was coherent. Every sentence he said was something that Xianxia had never thought of, so she wanted to interrupt and refute, but she couldn't find a chance. Now that he said this, he paused again. Looking at the stunned Xianxia, he sighed again. "It's just that the parents of the royal family don't have unconditional love. Not to mention that your senior brother and sister have such a status and identity." Filio. He suddenly called her by her name. "So, you really don't know why I betrayed you 4 days ago?" He stared straight at her. So, you really don't know why I betrayed you 4 days ago? Chapter 468. Whatever Li Yunxin said or asked in front of the word Shiliu became unimportant for a moment. Exen Shiliu's mind was now filled with Li Yunxin's suddenly softer tone and the word Shiliu. She was already angry and desperate, but now there was a twist. She was stunned for a while and then said in a daze. What? Then she came to her senses. What did you say? Li Yunxin looked at her seriously. People like Su Yusong and Zhou Xian won't spoil you unconditionally. They can tolerate you for many things, but there are some things that they can't tolerate. Do you think I really didn't know who you were before? After saying this, he looked at Exen Shiliu. You used to be Exen Shiliu and you're still Exen Shiliu. I already knew it on the way to Yunshan. Some words were ambiguous, and in the ears of people who didn't know what was going on, it was nonsense. But if it fell into the ears of others, it would be extremely clear. Exen Shiliu was stunned. You know? How did you know? Li Yunxin breathed a sigh of relief. He had been very unlucky these days, and now it seemed that he finally had good luck. He got the best result with just one test. So he smiled and shook his head. If I don't even know this, I would have died long ago after experiencing so many dangerous situations alone. After saying this, he looked at Exen Shiliu. What do you want me to do that day? Think about that day. I would rather die than surrender, and I was tenacious and unyielding. Then when things got worse, I would ask you to plead on my behalf. Exen Shiliu was about to speak, but Li Yunxin shook his head again. Don't be silly, Shiliu. I don't want you to do that kind of thing. Wandering souls. You are all wandering souls. Since you are a wandering soul, you should know what obsession is. Obsession is not something that can be judged by common sense. There is no reason to talk about it, he said in a low voice. Su Yusong and Zhou Xian used to be husband and wife, but they lost a child. Therefore they couldn't forget it and became an obsession. This thing is also the basis for them to transform into wandering souls and stay in this world. Then they created you, didn't they? Li Yunxin looked at her. Do you think they meant well? Exen Shiliu wasn't sure why he suddenly brought this up. In the past she wouldn't have told Li Yunxin this. But now, she seemed to have finally realized that things weren't like that, and that he seemed to have his own difficulties. For a moment she couldn't care about anything else. Thus she bit her lips. Now that I am immortal, I have many magical powers. Of course. Li Yunxin sighed. There are many ways to achieve longevity. They had Daotong, Kenzo and painting schools. You could even rule the world. If you want to live forever, isn't there a better way than being a wandering soul? Dao techniques could not be cultivated. Could he not cultivate the sword Dao? Now, aren't you also cultivating the Dao of painting? Exen Shiliu frowned. What are you trying to say? The reason why they wanted to refine you into a wandering soul was that they could refine your obsession. Li Yunxin looked at her with pity. Of course, there was some pity and gentleness in his eyes. I don't know what your obsession is. But you know that you were killed first and then refined, yet you are still so close to them. Can be seen that it is something similar. They actually refined you into their own child. But Shiliu. Li Yunxin paused. Which real parent in the world would treat their child as a plaything and kill her? They didn't do it for you, but for their own comfort. Exen Shiliu didn't say anything. It seemed that she knew what Li Yunxin said. However, her knowledge was different from ordinary people's knowledge. She knew, but she didn't feel anything. As a wandering soul, some obsession made her unable to resonate with certain things. He just knew it. After 2 breaths, she said in a low voice, but what does it have to do with our matter? It has to do with their obsession. Li Yunxin looked at her. Paranoid thoughts, paranoid possessiveness. In their hearts you should be theirs. In the secular world, ordinary parents are reluctant when they marry off their daughter, let alone a wandering soul who is the foundation of their existence. At first they asked you to see me to confuse me. But if they find out that you really love me and that your feelings don't just belong to the two of them, what do you think will happen to you? Li Yunxin spoke more slowly and made his voice lower. They don't love you. But your identity, your feelings. They can love one Exen Shiliu or they can love another person. As long as this person is in their heart and loves them. The love of a wandering soul and the love of an ordinary person may seem the same, But in fact there is a world of difference. This may be difficult for you to understand, but I do. So, I don't want you to do anything stupid. In your eyes it can prove my feelings for you, but it can push you to your death. Li Yunxin paused, took a deep breath and took a step back. Xianxia, don't worry. Xianxia, you are the most unlike a wandering soul I have ever seen. Although you are a member of the Freemasonry, you haven't done many evil things. Although you have obsession, you also have a sincere heart. This kind of heart is rare even in the secular world. You and I, our opponents, enemies. Our feelings can't come to fruition. But even so, I hope you can live a happy life. Li Yunxin looked at her. For days ago I wanted to tell you to give up. But just now my heart softened again. But I know that what I am doing now, whether for you or for me, is just drinking poison to quench thirst. Now, I will tell you for the last time. He was silent for a while and looked at Xianxia, who did not say a word. Don't come here anymore. I will die and I don't have much time left. You will forget me sooner or later. In the remaining days I just want to do what I should have done the most. At least before I die I will be proficient in what I should be proficient in, so that these last days will not be filled with regrets. I don't want my heart to be in turmoil again. Just think that I lied to you and betrayed you. After saying this he did not stay any longer. He turned around and entered the house, closing the door behind him. This time Xianxia did not make a fuss. She stood there in a daze, only staring at the door. Only tears flowed silently. Although you have obsession, you also have a sincere heart. I will die, and I don't have much time left. These last days will not be filled with regrets. Xianxia stood in front of the house for a quarter of an hour, repeating these heartless and sad words many times in her heart. Finally she turned around and slowly walked away. It was not until Xianxia disappeared behind the wall of locust trees that Li Yunxin slowly opened the door and walked out. It looked like he wanted to go out for some fresh air. He finally stopped beside the bamboo couch and looked down at the ground. The roasted chicken covered in dust was still lying on the ground. He bent down and picked up the roasted chicken, using 2 fingers to tear off a piece of meat from the chicken's breast. He didn't care about the dust on it and slowly put it into his mouth. He chewed it twice. His expression finally relaxed a little and he casually threw the roasted chicken away, then turned around and returned to the house. The rest of the day passed slowly. There was no sun on Little Cloud Mountain, only the top of the sky was shining. But even so, the light was no different from the sunlight. In the strong fragrance of locust flowers, the sky turned from bright white to warm yellow, and then from warm yellow to orange red. Finally, night fell and the lights in the floating mountain were lit up, as if there were really countless people living there. The 4th day and night of Li Yunxin's imprisonment passed like this. Other than the chirping of insects and birds, there were no other disturbances. So the 5th day came. Still nothing happened. Then it was the 6th day, the 7th day, the 8th day. Still nothing happened. No one came to see him again and no one sent him roasted chicken. Therefore he didn't know that in these days, other than him, the 8 dragon sons had all come to the Yi country. 2 dragon sons guarded one side, and there were tens of thousands of demon soldiers and demon generals under their command, like a pocket, surrounding the Black Tower in front of the Xuanmen's cultivators. In these days there were already small-scale conflicts between the 2 sides. Some demon soldiers and demon generals were not restrained, and ran to find trouble with the cultivators. In fact, most of it was because they were oppressed by the Xianmen cultivators in the past, and only dared to hide in the deep mountains. Now that they could finally fight to their heart's content, they were too complacent. These small-scale conflicts had wins and losses, but it didn't affect the overall situation. Among the Xianmen cultivators, the number of cultivators above the true state was more than twice the number of demons above the true state. Although the number of low-level cultivators was only 1/3 of the low-level demon soldiers and demon generals, there was no need to be afraid. The outcome of the war was ultimately decided by the high-level combat power. Humans and demons below the transcendent state couldn't even fly. Even if they had to squeeze out hundreds of thousands or millions of people on the ground, what could they do? Therefore it seemed that the war situation was extremely advantageous to the Xianmen cultivators. They had many high-level cultivators and they were well-disciplined. Their minds were more flexible than demons and there was no reason for them to lose. Until on the 9th day 2 news came. The first news was not noticed by people and only spread in the Allied camp. In fact, at this time the number of people in the Allied camp was gradually decreasing. Perhaps it was because the Qing soldiers were slaughtered by the cultivators for no reason, or because the emperors of the various countries had other plans. The Allied army of the various countries was retreating bit by bit, each with their own excuses. However, the cultivators didn't care much. After all, these mortals' mission was completed. A considerable amount of red soil and other resources were transported to the vicinity of Tongtian Swamp. If they left, then so be it. Staying here wouldn't be of any help and might even be a hindrance. Therefore, this news was known by very few cultivators and only mortals were interested. There had been a great change in the official circles of the Qing kingdom. It was said that the Qing heavenly official Zhou Xian of the Ministry of Officials had been beheaded for 10 unpardonable crimes. The Zhou clan within the Qing kingdom had also been executed. However, there were still some branches in other countries, so the Qing court had sent out documents to the neighboring countries, asking them to extradite the criminals to the Qing kingdom. As for how the other countries would react, it was not immediately clear. In the end, the Zhou clan within the Qing kingdom had already lost all hope of survival. There was no possibility of them rising again. Once the Zhou clan fell, a large number of their old students were also taken care of. It was said that everyone in the capital of the Qing kingdom felt insecure. Some officials had only heard the sound of horse hooves passing by their front door and were so frightened that they committed suicide. However, they were not the ones being taken. What was most surprising was that the person in charge of this purge was not the Qing emperor. Rather, it was the 18-year-old crown prince of the Qing kingdom. Thus, people realized that this should mean that the crown prince's power and position were gradually stabilizing and that he had already won the Qing emperor's trust. However, there were still people who were worried. The crown prince had full authority to handle this kind of matter. It was almost the same as handing all the vacancies to the crown prince. The new officials would all be his trusted aides. Thus, the power that had previously been taken away by the group of civil officials did not reach the Qing emperor's hands. Instead, it was taken by the crown prince. In the history of the various countries, this kind of situation was not a good thing. The crown prince's power was too great, so coups would occasionally happen. The Qing emperor's present actions were truly dangerous. However, the second piece of news that followed not only stunned those people who were worried about this, but it also startled the cultivators. It was said that it startled Yunshan and the two saints. On the 9th night, the Qing emperor died. The Qing emperor's soul was not restrained by Yanjun. A true Daotong realm cultivator stationed in the capital had not arrived in time. Within 2 hours of his death, the Qing emperor's soul used the power of faith of the 24,460,000 people within the Qing kingdom to, in one night, he became a true realm ghost emperor. Chapter 469. In reality, Daotong and Kenzo had expected such a thing to happen. Before, Emperor Li had become a ghost emperor. Now the battle between the Xian men and the demons was approaching. Cultivators had to be on guard. As a result, a true realm cultivator was assigned to guard every monarch. Most emperors welcomed this. Even an emperor would have a hard time seeing a true realm cultivator. Now they had to watch over them. It was a great opportunity. Many emperors who wanted to ask for cultivation methods and strengthen their bodies had high hopes for this. Some even used the power of the whole country to build a golden platform for immortals in one night. But the problem was, emperors were human but immortals were not like humans. Immortals did not like what emperors liked. They did not live in palaces as emperors had expected. Most of the immortals only showed their faces and gave their decrees. Then they disappeared. In reality, with the cultivation of true state cultivators, even if they were dozens of li away, it would only take a moment to get to the emperor's side. Even if they were to find a secluded place to cultivate, there wouldn't be any slip-ups. The situation in Qing kingdom was probably the same. The only difference was that the Qing emperor did not like these cultivators very much. In fact, he had liked them before. But the Qing emperor had made requests to Daotong and Kenzo through the cultivators stationed in the capital. He said he could offer all the rare treasures in his palace treasury in exchange for cultivation methods. And he would not be an emperor. Instead, he would be a low-level disciple in Daotong or Kenzo. Like all cultivators, he would diligently cultivate step by step in order to live forever. But his request was rejected once. After that, there was not even a response. This was a great humiliation for an emperor. Thus, in the following 10 years, the Qing emperor's attitude toward Daotong and Kenzo cultivators was always cold. This time, the cultivators stationed in Qing Kingdom's capital knew this. Thus, they only showed up once in the palace and left. Most emperors thought that the main purpose of these cultivators coming to the mortal world was to protect their personal safety. But in reality, it was the opposite. The cultivators did not care whether the emperors lived or died. What they cared about was the matter of attaining the body of a ghost emperor. If a demon invaded and wanted to kill the emperor, they only needed to ensure that the emperor's soul was erased as soon as he died. If the situation was special, he might take care of the empress and a few high-ranking officials. After all, even if the emperor died, there was still the crown prince. What was there to care about the life and death of a mortal? The cultivators of the Qing kingdom also thought so. However, the Qing kingdom once had a Xianxia man. On the 9th night, a true realm great demon appeared in the capital. However, this demon was not good at concealing its aura. As soon as it appeared, it was immediately noticed by the cultivators. The situation that the cultivators had expected had happened. The demons would also send out great demons to assassinate the emperors of the various countries and create a ghost emperor. Thus, he immediately gave chase and began to fight in the clouds high up in the sky. The demon was no match for it and fled far away. However, the cultivators did not pursue him. However, an hour later, the demon came again. The two sides fought again and the demon was still defeated. Thus, in the first half of the night, the demons had attacked 6 times. By the 7th time, the cultivators were slightly angered and chased a little further. When they were 100 li away from the capital, they suddenly sensed that the Qing emperor's life had been cut off. He was immediately shocked, afraid that he had fallen for the demon's plan to lure him away. However, just as he was about to rush back to collect the Qing emperor's soul, the true realm great demon made a scene and refused to let him go. Since it was so, he could only do his best to kill. 2 hours later, he finally killed the true realm great demon and returned to the capital. However, it was already too late. The Qing emperor had become a ghost emperor and had long disappeared. When he asked the palace servants beside him, he found out that he had not been killed by a demon. Instead, he had committed suicide. This kind of situation was not unanticipated. However, the problem was, ever since the Xian men had been passed down until now, the Qing emperor was the first emperor to commit suicide. The emperor had the most powerful power in the secular world. This kind of power was enough to provide them with even more powerful support, allowing them to face the heart demons that many mortals might have and not walk down the path of ruin themselves. Furthermore, for tens of thousands of years, the Xianmen cultivators had repeatedly explained one thing to the mortal emperors. There was a great difference between ghosts and humans. When people were alive, they had 7 emotions and 6 desires and their minds were clear. When people died, their souls were damaged. The so-called ghost soul was nothing more than an incomplete soul. The reason why people were people and were themselves was because they had their own memories, personalities, and even bodies. However, if they became a ghost, their memories were incomplete, their personalities changed, and their bodies no longer existed. They no longer liked the things they liked as a human and no longer hated the things they hated as a human. What did this have to do with themselves? Profound cultivators might be able to retain their own characteristics to a certain extent, but it was absolutely impossible for mortals. Furthermore, not only were the Xianmen cultivators wary of this matter, but Black Bai Yanjun also would not allow this to happen. In reality, in the lives of the emperors, they would at least once personally witness the miraculous methods of the Xianmen cultivators. That was after ascending the throne. After ascending the throne, cultivators would appear. They would explain to the mortal emperors some things that only a very small number of people knew and show evidence. For example, evidence of the existence of Sanluo Hall, Black Bai Yanjun, and evidence of the existence of celestials. Some of these evidence might be real and some might be fake. But for the mortal emperors, it was already ironclad evidence. From this, they knew that there were gods above the sky, and that there were retribution in the netherworld. Therefore, in the tens of thousands of years, the mortal emperors of the Midland might have been stupid and incompetent, but almost none of them were cruel and tyrannical. because they knew that there was a powerful force in the world that was beyond their understanding, watching everything at all times. Therefore, until the night of the 9th day, the Xianmen cultivators still thought that the possibility of an emperor suddenly committing suicide at this critical moment was very small. They did not expect that the Qing emperor would be the first. Then they realized that they had made a mistake. The reason for this mistake was related to the Xuanmen's policy toward the mortal world for tens of thousands of years. However, at this time many factors overlapped and finally led to a big disaster. They dealt with the Ghost Emperor excessively crudely. After learning that someone in the Qing army had personally seen the Ghost Emperor and spread the news in the allied camp, the Xuanmen's response was to send a low-level cultivator from the Five Swords sect, Dao Qizi, to the Qing army camp to deal with the matter. Dao Qizi's way of dealing with the matter was indeed the Xuanmen's style. He killed Ding Min and the others and then killed everyone who talked about the matter. Although this way of dealing with the matter could not seal the secret of the Ghost Emperor, it could minimize the impact. As for whether or not the other emperors would know of this matter and how they would react if they did, no one thought that they would have the courage to openly rebel against the Xianmen. Who would have thought that before this matter could be accomplished, Dao Qizi himself would be killed? Dao Qizi was killed, the golden light rushed over, fought with Li Yunxin, and affected a large number of mortal soldiers. In addition, Li Yunxin's encouraging words when he killed Dao Qizi not only did not forcefully suppress the matter of the Ghost Emperor, but it quickly spread like wildfire. In the mortal world there were many people born with keen eyes. They had long discovered that there had been more and more wandering ghosts in the world recently. They were afraid that something had happened to Sanluo Temple. All kinds of factors mixed together. Finally, the matter of the Qing Emperor happened. The death of the Qing Emperor was only the beginning. In this year 2 emperors had died. One was the Li Emperor who had achieved the mysterious realm of the Ghost Emperor's body. He had crippled 5 Xianmen high cultivators that previous emperors only dared to worship. Next was the Qing Emperor who had achieved the true realm of the Ghost Emperor's body. Although he did not start a killing spree, the true realm Xianmen cultivators could do nothing. The success rate was almost 100%. In the past, the Xianmen cultivators first warned the emperors that being a ghost was different from being a human. Then they warned them that Black Baiyanjun would collect souls. However, the cultivators had overlooked the difference between immortals and mortals. When immortals cultivated, the most important thing was one's self and one's heart. As emperors, although they had great power, how many things could they really do according to their own will? Secular farmers could even have affairs in the fields, but emperors still had to pay attention to their daily lives when they were having sex. To them, things like oneself and one's conscience became insignificant in the face of factors like absolute power, further authority, and eternal existence. If they knew that Black Baiyanjun would no longer collect souls, then the saying, "being a ghost means you are not yourself," was not worth mentioning in the face of an emperor with a heart of steel. Thus, on the 10th day, Emperor Yu, who had been badly battered because of the rebel army's power, died and transformed into a ghost emperor. It was suicide. At noon on the 10th day, Rong's army attacked the capital of Yu Kingdom. Yu Kingdom fell. At the same time, Yi Emperor died and also committed suicide. But at this time the cultivators of the Mystic Gate were already on guard. Although there were demons pestering Yi Di when he passed away, the front line of the Mystic Gate was still within the borders of the Yi Kingdom. A profound realm cultivator rushed over to kill the true realm demon, and the true realm cultivator rushed to the palace in time to scatter Yi Di's soul. But things were already out of control. On the 10th night, another 5 emperors died. 4 of them committed suicide and their souls were scattered. One of them was about to commit suicide and was destroyed in body and soul by a cultivator. Although there was a lesson from last time, the Xianmen cultivators could not change their attitude toward secular people. A cultivator killed an emperor in the palace. This matter caused a stir in the world. Some emperors began to announce the expulsion of Xianmen cultivators within their borders. Although others watched with cold eyes, they already felt the cold in their hearts. Xianmen, who had protected the secular world for more than 50,000 years, seemed to have lost the hearts of the people in just a few days. And one of the initiators of all this was still imprisoned on the floating mountain. It was already the 10th day. Chapter 470. Li Yunqing was still sitting on the bamboo couch. It was getting dark outside and the night was coming. The locust flowers at the edge of the courtyard had withered, and the green grass was covered in white. However, the fragrance was still there, but it became soft. Usually he would get up and go back to the house after an hour. But today he decided to wait a little longer. He had fixed the things in his mind in the past 10 days. Now he had to wait for something new. But it didn't come. The 5th or 6th day should have come. Thinking of this, he even raised his hand and touched his face in confusion. What went wrong? He had spent enough effort and done enough work that day. There was no reason. No reason. Suddenly he heard footsteps. His heart skipped a beat and he turned to look. But it wasn't Xianxia but a young man. His appearance had changed but his temperament hadn't. Li Yunqing squinted his eyes and realized that this person should be Zhou Xian. Oh, so that's what happened. Li Yunqing heaved a sigh of relief. He was finally relieved but he was also disappointed. At this time the lights in the house were also turned on, and the sky was finally completely dark. Warm yellow light shone from the window, casting warm spots of light on the wooden platform, the grass and the bay outside. In fact, it looked very leisurely and comfortable. Tonight, Zhou Xian was dressed like a young man in his mid-20s. He looked dignified, calm and steady and gave off a feeling of majestic grandeur. Zhou Xian walked 4 or 5 steps away from Li Yunqing and stopped. He stared at him for a while as if he was thinking about something. Since he was here and Xianxia was not, it probably meant that Li Yunqing's plan had failed. Therefore, he was too lazy to get up. He just lay down rudely and responded to Zhou Xian's gaze. After about half an hour, Zhou Xian suddenly said, "Why do you have a demon seed?" Li Yunqing frowned. What? He didn't expect the other party to ask this question. It was the first time he heard the word, demon seed. Oh, you haven't heard of it? Demonic seed. Zhou Xian nodded and paced on the ground. Then I'll ask you another question. How can you use your supernatural power in Mount Shaoyin? Many thoughts flashed through Li Yunqing's mind. He realized that Zhou Xian was probably talking about something he thought he knew, but in reality he didn't. Zhou Xian asked him how he could use his divine sense in Mount Shaoyin. Zhu Xing told him that the origin of the cultivation method of the art of painting was different from that of Daotong and Kenzo. Therefore his divine sense could still be used. Since the sage of calligrapher had said so, Li Yunqing accepted it without hesitation. But now hearing Zhou Xian's question, could it be related to some demonic seed? Li Yunqing subconsciously circulated her spiritual energy through her snow mountain ocean of qi, meridians and acupoints. But he didn't notice anything messy. He paused and said calmly, "That's because I cultivate the art path. In essence it's different from that of Daotong and Kenzo." Zhou Xian smiled. "Oh, that's what he told you." Actually, up until now Zhou Xian was probably the most comfortable to get along with among all the bad guys that Li Yunqing had met. Because just by looking at his appearance, tone of speech and style of doing things, he really looked like a gentle and honest person. He wasn't as ruthless and cruel as other demons, nor was he as evil and strange as other wandering souls. Compared to the cultivators of Xianmen, he was more human. But it was this person who had instigated a series of troublesome things. And now he smiled and said this as if he was chatting, then added, "Actually he doesn't know either. The origin of the painting path cultivation method that he told you about was mostly what Qin Zhao told him 1,000 years ago. As for whether Qin Zhao told the truth, it's hard to guess. But you won't have the chance to ask him anymore." Zhou Xian looked up at Li Yunqing. "I've already erased his consciousness. I'm going to refine him into a wandering soul. A wandering soul made from a saint's tribulation body will definitely be extraordinary." Li Yunqing was silent for a moment. "I don't have any special relationship with him. At first we were just natural allies determined by our positions. If you're willing I can still work for you now." Zhou Xian's expression was originally indifferent. But after hearing Li Yunqing's indifferent words, his brows suddenly furrowed imperceptibly, and the corners of his mouth also pressed down. It was as if he wanted to reprimand him but he suppressed it. Li Yunqing keenly noticed this and didn't say anything. Then Zhou Xian snorted and laughed. "There's no need to talk about this now. Let me tell you first, why can you use your divine ability in Little Cloud Mountain? Because there's a demonic seed in your body, not some painting technique. Then he pointed at himself. In my body. All the wandering souls of the Freemasonry have demonic seeds in their bodies. There are also demonic seeds in the bodies of demons. In fact, it's precisely because this thing originally appeared in the bodies of demons and was the most common in the bodies of demons that it got this name. Li Yunqing blinked. You're lying. If demons all have demonic seeds in their bodies, how could I have never heard of this? Su Yusong smiled faintly. Heard? Where did you hear it? In these 50,000 years, how did the celestial sect of wonders explain the matter of animals obtaining the Tao? The saying you heard was just that they sensed the essence of the sun and moon and sensed the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, so they developed intelligence and became enlightened. Don't you find it strange? Li Yunqing frowned. What's strange? But after saying this he was stunned. He already knew what was strange. Many things were like this. It was often right in front of him, but he was used to seeing it and didn't feel anything unusual. But if someone pointed it out he would immediately be enlightened. For example now. Thinking about it carefully, the demons were indeed a little strange. This referred to the cultivation method of the celestial sect of wonders. From how to refine the first wisp of spiritual energy to how to enter the supreme Wangqing, there were detailed explanations and elaborations. In Li Yunqing's view, this was indeed a self-consistent theory that was completely in line with the laws of this world. Could explain many things and also predict many things. Whether a person could cultivate or not, to what extent they could cultivate with such a theory to test, there was almost no error. But when it came to demons there was no theory or system. As for what kind of animals could obtain the Tao, there was only a vague sentence. Obtain the opportunity to gain spiritual intelligence. But what was the opportunity? No one could explain it. This was a world of difference from the situation of human cultivators. However, this was not strange in the eyes of the people of this world. After all, humans and animals were different, so it was reasonable for humans to be different from demons. But Li Yunqing knew that humans, monkeys, cows and horses were essentially no different. They were just living creatures. When humans obtained the Tao through cultivation, didn't they also become intelligent? Thinking of this, he opened his mouth and looked at Su Yusong as if he suddenly understood. Ah, it's really strange. A person who hid something and didn't say it, but insisted on asking the other party bit by bit, probably liked to see the other party have such a reaction. Perhaps Su Yusong knew that Li Yunqing was echoing him, or perhaps he didn't care even if he knew, so he just smiled. Strange. But in the past the cultivators of the celestial sect of wonders didn't find it strange. Or, the high-level cultivators wanted to forget emotions, so they didn't take the demons seriously. It should be known that 3,000 years ago, the highest cultivation level of the demons in this world was only in the profound realm. Since they could steadily suppress the demons for tens of thousands of years, why would they bother to find out how the animals obtained the Tao? If they really found out and the demons obtained it, wouldn't they be looking for a big trouble for themselves? Until we slowly took over Cloud Mountain and wanted to solve this matter once and for all. Su Yusong said slowly, if we could know how the animals obtained the Tao, then it would be very easy to exterminate them. If we could exterminate them, then it would be very easy to suppress and defend them. So we began to do it secretly. And we achieved some results. Hearing this, Li Yunqing's heart skipped a beat and he sat up from the bed. This is the secret. The legendary secret, that if you obtain it you can conquer all the demons in the world? Su Yusong smiled. No. Li Yunqing spread his hands. Oh. Su Yusong looked at Li Yunqing for a while as if many thoughts were going through his mind. And Li Yunqing also looked at him. In fact, he understood the current situation. The two of them were talking peacefully in the beautiful and warm courtyard, and the atmosphere seemed to be very harmonious. What kind of situation it was? It was the calm before the storm. He could feel the suppressed anger under Su Yusong's gentle appearance. As it was too strong. Su Yusong could be extremely angry but calm. Because it seemed that there would be other programs in the future. This Su Yusong let out a light breath and continued, the result we achieved was nothing. Originally, I thought it would be very simple. Following the cultivation method of the Xianmen, finding similar principles and rules and testing it on the demons. But no matter how we tried, we never succeeded. At that time, it was 5,000 years ago. The experiment lasted for nearly 1,000 years. At that time, we still didn't have control over the saints, and could only rely on the masters of the heavenly caves and the sect masters to slowly advance these things. So many people's intelligence and wisdom, but there were no results for 1,000 years. So we decided to use a more stupid method. Su Yusong stretched out a finger and pointed to the ground, heaven-reaching swamp. This place 5,000 years ago was a high mountain. The mountain was steep and the main peak was especially majestic. Many years ago the main peak was hollowed out and used to anchor the cloud mountain. So we added a restriction on the top of the main peak and set up a huge cage. This cage could contain several large cities in the secular world, and could accommodate hundreds of thousands of people. We also set up mountains, rivers, weather, rain and snow inside, and had specialized cultivators look after it. Then we put 1 million birds and beasts inside. Chapter 471. Since we can't deduce anything, we've decided to observe some principles, to find out what can be achieved and why we can achieve Tao. Then 500 years passed like this. Su Yusong took a deep breath. The spiritual energy on the main peak was rich and those animals were much stronger than those in other places. But they were only strong. In 500 years, they reproduced from generation to generation, and there were indeed 4 demons among them. But there was nothing special about those 4 demons. They didn't have more or stronger spiritual energy than other places just because the spiritual energy here was rich. From this, it can be seen that the spiritual energy of heaven and earth had a great impact on whether the demons could achieve Tao or not. So, in the next 500 years, cultivators were sent to preach to them. However, after 500 years, only 5 fiendish demons had appeared. From this, it can be seen that opportunities and the like have no impact on the demons achieving Tao. After the demons gained spiritual intelligence, listening to the preaching was beneficial, but if their spiritual intelligence was not developed, it was useless no matter how they preached. So, we abandoned this place, we removed the prohibition spell and didn't care about it anymore. Because we thought of a new direction. Why not look at those demons who had achieved Tao and see what they had in common? Su Yusong lowered his head and smiled, shaking his head. I should have thought of this earlier. After a thorough investigation I was able to find something. The spiritual intelligence of these demons who achieved Tao seemed to come out of nowhere. It wasn't born little by little, but one day, it suddenly became clear and enlightened. And the little bit of clarity in their spiritual platform seemed to be some kind of supernatural power, rules. And because of this little bit of clarity, the demons could enjoy the worship of the human world and be fine, but human cultivators couldn't. Since it was found in the bodies of the demons, we called it the demon seed. Until today we still haven't found out where the demon seed came from, and why it only exists in the bodies of the demons. Su Yusong said this, looking at Li Yunxin. Now that you are a demon, you should also have that little bit of clarity. It's just that the demon seed has already merged with you, so you can't feel it. The so-called demon seed was a new concept for Li Yunxin. Does matter. If even he didn't know about it, then not many people in the world would know about it. He frowned and thought for a while. He looked up at Su Yusong and said, "But you, the master of calligraphy and the master of art, can all use their supernatural powers here. So many saints have lived on this cloud mountain. It is the sacred land of the Xian sect." Naturally, there would be a lot of arrangements. It had been passed down from generation to generation and restrictive formations were everywhere. Whether it was him or me, we were only able to use our divine abilities because of the ubiquitous restrictions. But even so, most of the formations can no longer be used and only a few are still in use. He thought that I couldn't control his body as I pleased, so I wouldn't be able to use those formations. Even though I haven't cultivated the 6 desires tribulation body, I still have other tricks up my sleeves. It's okay to use it once in a while. Su Yusong looked at Li Yunxin. But Art Saint can use divine powers. Not because of restrictions or arrays. Just like you, she has a demonic seed in her body. I think because of this, only you can make the fastest progress in cultivating the painting Tao. Su Yusong's eyes slowly narrowed. Where did you come from? Li Yunxin had previously guessed that other people's slow progress in cultivating the painting Tao was because Art Saint had led everyone astray. But now Su Yusong gave him another explanation. Maybe it was a combination of both. as he thought of an example. The sheriff, Shu Ku, Pheasant, and Sky were the 4 demons who listened to him. Moreover, the cultivation technique that he described also had some painting techniques and tricks in it. Then, the 4 demons hadn't taken human form at first, but later they progressed abnormally fast and reached the emptiness realm. Was it really related to their demonic seeds? Would those with demonic seeds be faster in cultivating the painting Dao? If that was the case, he could finally understand what the so-called demonic of art saint entering the demonization realm 1,000 years ago referred to. As for where did he come from, naturally it was useless to ask. After thinking about this, Li Yunxin stood up and looked at Su Yusong. I already know what the demonic seeds are about. So, why are you telling me this? Su Yusong smiled again and waved his hand. Let's put this aside for now. I'm not just talking about the demonic seeds, there's also another thing. I said that the main peak that used to be the cage was abandoned. Do you know what happened later that led to today's Tongtian swamp? He narrowed his eyes before and smiled now. These 2 movements fell into Li Yunxin's eyes and he knew that the gentler he looked at this time, the angrier he was in his heart. It seemed that he was finally going to get to the point. So he also took a deep breath. I'm all ears. Su Yusong looked at him with a smile and said softly, that place was abandoned 4,000 years ago and after that no one cared about it. The Cloud Mountain fell once every 500 years and it only passed once. Then 3,000 years ago the Cloud Mountain fell again. But it found that there was a rock demon there. As for the real body, it was one of the many golden feathered rocks that were placed inside 2,000 years ago. This demon had originally gained spiritual intelligence 2,000 years ago, but it was lucky to fool people. So, it first cultivated in this place with rich spiritual power for 500 years, and its cultivation was already quite profound. So it concealed itself. In the remaining 500 years, it listened to the Xianmen cultivators preach. It actually became the first demon to cultivate the heavenly heart technique. Its progress was even faster. You have to know that there are actually quite a lot of demons who have gained spiritual intelligence. But the reason why there are so few demons is because they kill each other. And this rock demon had no natural enemies in the cage, but it was not only nourished by spiritual power, but also cultivated the technique. 2,000 years. Su Yusong sighed softly. Then it became the first demon to enter the supreme emotionless realm with the Daoist technique. Li Yunxin was stunned. After a while he said, "You're talking about the Golden Rock King." "Yes, the Golden Rock King." Su Yusong sighed and said, "By 3,000 years ago this golden rock was already in the supreme realm. Because it cultivated the Daoist technique, it became bolder. It actually appeared and requested that the mountain be given to him as a Daoist field, so that he could restrain all the demons in the world and become the common master of all demons. From then on, it lived in harmony with the Xianmen and protected the world together." Such a request in the eyes of the Xianmen, isn't it extremely daring? Moreover, it was also the first great demon to enter the supreme realm. No one wanted it to stay in the world. So there was a huge battle. After that battle, the mountain disappeared, but the Tongtian swamp appeared. The Xianmen lost many people and the rock demon also escaped. In the end, the Xianmen no longer mentioned the matter of killing the rock demon, and the rock demon also didn't mention the common master of the world. Both of them suffered losses, and were temporarily unable to do anything to each other. But there was a tacit agreement, on the basis that the rock demon didn't reveal the heavenly heart technique to the demons. Hearing this, Li Yunxin took a deep breath. Previously, when he was in the Hatred Palace, he had heard Bai Yunxin talk about the past of her adoptive father being sealed, the appearance of Shinryu 2,000 years ago. So at that time the 3 sages instigated a dispute between Shinryu and the Rock King, and helped Shinryu seal the Golden Rock. Now that he heard this from Su Yusong, he understood why it wasn't the Shinryu that was sealed. It was because the Rock King knew about the heavenly heart technique. The Xianmen had long wanted to get rid of him. But the problem was still, why was he telling him this? Su Yusong saw his expression and smiled again. "Now the Golden Rock's adoptive daughter is in my hands. Red Madam is also in my hands now. You should know that Red Lady has half of the dragon soul in her body. You should also know how the Golden Rock was sealed back then. Li Yunxin let out a light breath. Su Yusong, you're finally getting to the point. With these two things I can find the place where the golden rock is sealed and release him. Once the golden rock is released, it will definitely seek trouble with Shinryu. But Shinryu is far away in the east and the 9 dragon sons are right in front of me. So, this golden rock is my trump card. It depends on whether I want to use it or not. So you're right. The smile on Su Yusong's face slowly faded. His tone also gradually became cold. I didn't capture Bai Yunxin and Red Lady for Shilio. It was for myself. Oh. Li Yunxin sighed. He told you. She ran to get the painting technique. Su Yusong stared at him coldly. She still wants to know the method to break your seal from me. But how can I not know what she wants to do? I asked her a little and then I knew how you told her that day. Li Yunxin, you've learned to be a gossiper. Knowing this result, Li Yunxin laughed. So I'm right. The gentle and honest Mr. Su, who doesn't bat an eyelid when talking about the general situation of the world, is now talking about his little daughter, but his anger is overflowing. It's obvious that obsession can't be touched. Once it is touched, it will jump up and down. So she wanted to save me but was stopped by you. Now, you've made up your mind to kill me and before that you were just chatting with someone who is about to die? Su Yusong was not moved and only looked at him coldly. 10 days ago you begged me for mercy and I said that you have no character and integrity, so I hesitated to take you in. But I still imprisoned you here to see what kind of person you are. This is the second chance I'm giving you. But now you're bewitching a woman. You want to rely on her to help you escape. Not only do you have no integrity but you're also despicable. You've indeed used up both chances. I'm indeed going to kill you. But you'll have a dignified death. Su Yusong said hatefully, but because you sowed discord and dared to sow discord between us and Shilio, not only will you die but you'll die miserably. 4 days later the Cloud Mountain will fall. The Daoist sect and the demons will also go to war. At that time, I want you to die miserably in front of the 2 armies, in front of all the cultivators and demons in the world. I'll also let people see what kind of ending the so-called intelligent Wei River Dragon King will end up in. Su Yusong said this and while staring at Li Yunxin's eyes, his figure slowly faded. You can rest assured. People like you don't deserve to be a wandering soul. You'll be destroyed in body and soul and no one will remember you. Chapter 472. After these calm but cold words faded away, Su Yusong's figure completely disappeared. The courtyard was still the courtyard and there was still warm light in the night sky. However, the courtyard seemed to have changed from a cage to a death cage. Su Yusong disappeared. Li Yunxin didn't say a word. His face was calm. He slowly turned around and walked back to the house. When he entered the door, he lifted the curtain. The first time his hand slipped and only lifted a corner. He was too lazy to move his hand a second time, so he just walked in. The white cotton curtain slid past his face, looking like a shroud. After entering the house, he didn't do anything else. He walked to the bed and sat cross-legged as if he was adjusting his breathing. But he only sat for a quarter of an hour before lying down. It was as if some kind of emotion in his heart had made him unable to be calm. Everything he had done before had lost its meaning, but he didn't know what to do. Some people were abnormally calm when they were about to die, and they deserved the reputation of being calm. In the secular world, Li Yunxin's state at the moment belonged to that category. But as a cultivator, many details showed that his heart was not calm, and he was even a little scared. However, among these many details, there was a small detail that did not stand out. Li Yunxin let out a long breath gently. But Su Yusong and Zhuo, who were looking at him in front of the mirror, didn't pay special attention to it. Because such a breath was more likely to be a breath of fear. Humph. Now you look like this again. Su Yusong looked at Li Yunxin coldly, not letting go of any of his actions. After watching for a quarter of an hour, he turned to the person behind him and said, "Do you see now? Li Yunxin has no feelings for you. Everything he did and said a few days ago was just a last-ditch struggle. When a person is about to die, he can do anything. Now I've finally exposed him. Do you still have the calmness you saw a few days ago?" Zhuo stood beside him. The person behind him was Xianxia. At this moment, Xianxia didn't speak. He could only stare at Li Yunxin's reflection in the mirror, standing there in a daze. After a long while he finally spoke. His voice was soft as if he didn't care about anything, just like Li Yunxin. How do you plan to kill him in 4 days? Su Yusong looked at Xianxia. Naturally, first humiliate then kill. This Li Yunxin who knew how many places he had left as a backup plan. If he was killed silently on Mount Cloudy today, according to the impression many people had of him in the past, they would think that maybe he is not dead, but is just waiting for an opportunity to make a comeback. Those people and those things aren't worth our time and energy wasting. Therefore, this method was to let everyone know that he was completely dead. What wisdom, scheming, it was just a case of being too smart for one's own good. The tree fell. The monkeys scattered. That way I won't have anything to worry about. Xianxia bit her lip when she heard his words. She said in a low voice, it turns out that senior brother didn't want him to die like this because he said something right. Xianxia turned around and walked to her side. He raised his hand to tidy her hair, slightly lowered his head and looked at her seriously. Since you know that everything Li Yunxin said before was to survive, how could you not know that he was just being alarmist? Was he exaggerating? Senior brother and sister wanted you to be a wandering soul not because of anything else. But the cultivation method of the cultivators of the Xianmen, to cultivate people into monsters like demons. What if you don't go through the tribulation? You will become like your senior brother Qing Liangchong. Also crazy. So they asked you to be a wandering soul but not to cultivate anything else, only the way of painting. Look at you now. Xianxia gently pinched her sharp chin. Beautiful and smart, happy and sad at the same time. Aren't you the most ordinary and the most extraordinary little girl? If it were someone else, why would senior brother and sister spend so much effort? Xianxia blinked her eyes. Then, after saying this twice she said, then what about the people of Munanju? Won't they come to save Li Yunxin? Xianxia said a series of doting words, but Xianxia suddenly asked about Munanju. This female sword saint looked at him and seemed to be somewhat disappointed. She glanced at Su Yusong and sighed lightly. Munanju, don't you know what Munanju is like? Su Yusong thought for a moment and said in a low voice. When he mentioned the 3 words Munanju, his expression became slightly solemn. Back then you could be considered to have infiltrated into the core of our organization, but you could only send messages through a single line of communication with the people there. Until now, the person with the highest rank that we know is only the head manager of the branch. What have we been afraid of all these years? We were not afraid of them coming out but afraid that they would not come out. We first infiltrated into the cultivators of the Xianmen and the demons. But they first infiltrated into the hundreds of millions of common people in the world. Until a few years ago when we roughly controlled the Xianmen, when we wanted to control the world, we realized that among the people of the world, it was already their power and it was very difficult to interfere. That's smart. Su Yusong snorted lowly. Even if our history is shorter than the Xianmen, it can still be considered to have existed for an eternity. But that Munanju has only appeared in the world for 1 or 2,000 years. Now it has already caused us to be afraid. It is because they, Li Yunxin, walked the same path, did not challenge cultivators and demons, and instead buried many foreshadowing in the secular world. Mortals are useless. But if there are hundreds of millions of mortals, it is also a rather terrifying power. The master of Munanju is mysterious and unfathomable. Even now, I only have this name. Can be assumed that he took a fancy to Li Yunxin because their style of doing things is extremely similar. This time killing Li Yunxin is precisely to kill him slowly. If the people of Munanju really came to save him, I would be more than happy. Now that we are infiltrating the secular world, they are also infiltrating the cultivators. We can also take this opportunity to dig out all the forces that have yet to gain a firm foothold on Mount Yunshan. At that time, Shilio, you don't need to be a spy anymore and you don't need to live a secretive life anymore. Don't tell me you're not happy? Xianxia was silent for a while, then said sullenly, I'm happy. After saying this, she thought for a while and said, I'm leaving. After saying this, she turned around and left. Xianxia called out, Where are you going? Su Yusong pulled her. Let her be. Everything will be fine in a few days. After saying this, he also flicked his sleeve, brushing away the mirror that was observing Li Yunxin. Then he also walked away, going to the back. Zhuomuxia knew that the back he was talking about was the place where the sage of calligraphy was imprisoned. Thus he sighed softly. In the end I told you to capture him. But the other one? I don't know where he went. Back then their souls were beaten out of their bodies by us. It clearly looked like they went together. But all these years I only saw him move around. There's no news of the other one. Do you think there will be any changes? The other one she was talking about was naturally the female sword saint who was originally called Zhuomuxia. Hearing her words, Su Yusong's footsteps slowed down. After thinking for a while he comforted her. I know you're worried now. You're worried about the situation after 4 days. But I've already gone to the elder's place in the afternoon, and they've already agreed. Zhuomuxia was stunned. Agreed to let us leave the mountain? Su Yusong laughed. How can there be such a good thing? After saying this he paused and the smile on his face gradually disappeared. He sighed softly, putting his hands behind his back. He paced a few steps in this wide and spacious hall and said with emotion, sigh. Thinking about it, these 1,000 years it's really... The elders are all celestials who descended into the world. Celestials. They are omnipotent in the sky and have never placed us mortals in their eyes. But when they came to the world their abilities were limited and they were even more afraid of death than us mortals. They always hid behind the scenes and never showed themselves. The two of us obtained these 2 bodies and became sages. Thus, the 2 of us were also listed as elders. Hey, you and I both know it. First, it's because we've been dealing with the affairs of the human world these years, and our power has gradually grown. The wandering souls have also grown up. The 2 of us are no longer insignificant pawns in the eyes of the elders. Second, the 2 of us have been imprisoned in this little cloud mountain for 1,000 years. I'm afraid the elders are worried that once we go out, we won't be restrained anymore. He seemed to have said these words many times in the past. The elders are afraid of them but they can't leave them. So they can only be imprisoned in this little cloud mountain and can't go out and let them take command. Zhuomuxia frowned. Why are you suddenly talking about this? Su Yusong sneered. So, I naturally can't tell them that we're going to leave the mountain. If I say so they won't agree. So what I'm talking about is the matter of the Ghost Emperor. His words stunned Zhuomuxia but he quickly smiled. I see, you've always told me that I don't need to worry about the matter of the Ghost Emperor and you'll handle it. So there's such a plan. It seemed that because the matter was about to succeed, the 2 of them were in a good mood. Hearing her say this, Su Yusong also smiled. You've already thought it through? Then tell me, have you seen through me? Zhuomuxia smiled and also paced a few steps. Since you said that the matter of the mortal emperors would be left to you, it can be seen that you've already thought it through. Then how could you not know that the Qing soldiers ran into Emperor Li and Emperor Yi and spread the news without restraint? But at the time when those people sent people to 5 Songsword sect, you didn't deal with it. Instead you waited a few more days until the matter had spread like wildfire before sending people to cover up the lid. If you sent people because you truly wanted to put an end to this matter, you wouldn't have sent those stupid Daoist priests and swordsmen. But you ordered the Golden Light to send a transcendent realm swordsman who hadn't passed the tribulation of love. Naturally you messed up the matter. Thus it reached the ears of the various emperors. If the second step was also messed up, then the third step, if you truly wanted to handle it well, we had more people. You might as well send 2 true realm cultivators by each emperor's side. 1 to protect, 1 to guard against demons. But you only sent 1. It really is like the style of those stupid Taoist priests. Thus, the matter of the Ghost Emperor finally happened. Originally, it could have been prevented, but now 2 emperors have done it. Originally, the 2 true realm cultivators could defend, but this time the 2 emperors can't defend. Zhuomuxia thought for a moment. I'm guessing that you went to the top to see the elders at noon to talk about sending more cultivators to the mortal world. Su Yusong laughed loudly. Yes. Right now the battle is imminent, but they still have no intention of letting our Qian mountain go to the battlefield. Then we have to force them. I went to talk to them about the Ghost Emperor in the afternoon and said that 2 people can't defend anymore. We need 3 people. Originally, we only need to defend against the emperors, but now that the matter has spread to the entire world, how can only the emperors have such thoughts? For example, the popular empress, the regent, the ministers and officials who are loved by the people. If it's a big country, once they are enlightened, they are even more threatening than the emperors of small countries. Therefore, not only do we need 3 true realm cultivators to guard, we also need to send some transcendent realm cultivators to keep an eye on the people below. Thus, almost 1/3 of the people in the celestial sect can't go to the battlefield. Su Yusong smiled coldly. Guess what question the elders asked me when I told them about this? Zhuomuxia thought for a moment and a smile appeared on his face. This smile was the same as Su Yusong's. It was cold with a hint of pleasure. I guess they asked you about the safety of Yunshan. Yes. Su Yusong smiled coldly again. They want to overthrow the celestial sect, but they don't want to destroy Yunshan. They want Yunshan to still be high in the sky and be their safe nest. So they asked me if we divide our forces, can we still ensure the safety of Yunshan on the basis of destroying the celestial sect? Then you agree at once. You said there's no problem. Zhuomuxia said with a smile. Then the elder seemed to be deep in thought. Su Yusong shook his head. Most of the time I really don't know what these celestial people are like. It doesn't matter how they are in the celestial realm, but now that they are in the mortal world. In my eyes, they are a bunch of idiots. Extremely timid, hesitant in everything. It seems that one wrong step will lead to eternal damnation. But how can there be anything that is completely safe in this world? Just watch. Although I said there's no problem. But they will think about it at the top and in the end, they will definitely send us out. Su Yusong took a deep breath. We have worked hard for so many years, just to make the situation happen today. It's been 1,000 years. We can finally leave this little cloud mountain. After he said this, the two suddenly fell silent. After a while, Zhuomuxia walked to his side, straightened his clothes and straightened his belt. We have been puppets for many years. She whispered in his ear. I hope we can succeed this time and go back to being ourselves. I also hope we can really do something for this world. Su Yusong smiled. Victory is already in our hands. Very soon it will all be ours. Chapter 473. The 11th day. Wildland Forest, Fireleaf Mountain. This mountain was very close to the border between Qinyi and Qinyi. Originally, the mountain was covered with red maple trees. In autumn it would turn red, hence the name Fire Leaf. But since a while ago the maple leaves became fire leaves, the mountain became bare. That fire was not a normal fire. Not only were the trees destroyed, even the roots and seeds hidden underground were burned. Now that the fire was extinguished, the mountain was still bare and black. Only a few strange rocks were scattered on the mountaintop. Grandmother Bean and Lu Ling were standing next to these strange rocks. Counting carefully, there were actually 5 of them. Although the shapes were not regular, they were all long, huge rocks. 4 of them were arranged vertically together, and 1 was slightly slanted to the side. Among the 4 vertical rocks, the second one from the right was especially long, twice as long as the other 3. The rock seemed to have been cut out, and this arrangement was also intentional. Seeing this, Grandmother Bean knew that she had finally found it. After searching for more than 10 days, she had broken the 35 major acupoints that Li Yunxin had placed in the vast wildland forest. This last one was hidden the most, and it took her 4 days and 4 nights to cover a radius of more than 10 li. Now that she had found it, Grandmother Bean slowly walked around it under the morning sun, reaching out her hand to touch it, and carefully felt the flow of spiritual power. Only after an hour did he finally stop and let out a sigh of relief. That's right. She reached out her hand and rubbed her forehead. After a moment of silence, she said emotionally, "This Li Yunxin is also a genius." She had said this more than once. Almost every time she broke an acupoint formation, she would say this with emotion. According to her, not to mention the fact that these acupoints were able to guide the flow of spiritual power between them across hundreds of thousands of miles in such an exquisite manner. Just the other point alone, many of the techniques he used didn't seem to be proper painting methods, but were discovered by him through trial and error, was enough to show that if he had enough time and opportunity, he would definitely become a great master in this field. But what she didn't know was that Li Yunxin was not willing to explore. That was because he really had nothing to learn. After all, the tactical array set up in the city of Wei was a small one. He had previous experiences to follow. However, other than the art saint, no one had ever tried such a huge array a second time. Quantitative change led to qualitative change. Many previous experiences and principles were no longer applicable, so he could only boldly try it himself. And the reason why Dopa was so emotional this time was because, while she was breaking Li Yunxin's formation, she was also learning many things that she had never imagined before. It was to the extent that he knew that this was the last one and his heart was filled with regret. Actually, if she wanted more, she would be able to comprehend more. Thus, when facing this formation, Grandmother Bean didn't act rashly as usual. Instead, he studied it carefully and then he frowned slightly. This was because he felt that the way these 5 stones were arranged seemed a little special and familiar. It seemed to be a finger seal. She confirmed it over and over again before she tried to pinch it with her hands. It was a gesture she had never seen before. The finger technique was to clench a fist. Then he stuck out his middle finger. These 5 huge rocks were indeed arranged in such a manner. She was a little confused. She thought about it seriously for another 15 minutes, but still couldn't find anything. But this wasn't the first time this happened. Up until now, she had seen a total of 7 formations that she didn't understand, including this one. It was the 8th. One, 2 short and 1 long, was arranged like a comb with a handle and 2 teeth. Another also consisted of 3 long stones, 1 lying flat, the other 2 placed vertically at either end of it. Still another, 3 stones, arranged in a similar manner to the second one. However, the second opening was facing the sky and the third opening was facing the right. The last one looked like the word big, but it was also facing the right. Needless to say, there were some that looked like the word ya, and some that looked like the word mouth. But Grandmother Bean didn't think that these arrangements were indeed unknown. She thought that there must be something special about them, but she couldn't see Li Yunxin and explore them with her own eyes. This was also a big regret. But still she had to do something. She held her breath and focused and circulated the spiritual energy in her body, intending to destroy this last formation. At this point, all the spiritual energy in the big formation had gathered in this formation. Once it was destroyed, the terrifying spiritual energy would surge out and cause unimaginable damage. So she needed to carefully guide the 2 of them to be safe. A quarter of an hour later, Grandmother Bean shouted in a low voice and fiercely struck the boulder with her palm. This palm was actually a restriction. First, he restricted the flow of energy in the formation, and the spiritual energy would naturally become chaotic. Once the spiritual energy was disturbed, the formation would collapse on its own. At that time, this area of several dozen miles would become a hell of fire, and the land that had been burned by the wildfire would welcome a second baptism of fire. But this time the soil and rocks would become molten magma. He struck the huge rock. The huge rock shattered. Cracks like a spider web spread all over the rock, and in just a breath's time, it turned into stone chips. The rock was destroyed. She immediately felt that there was a problem with the spiritual energy in the formation. 2 breaths later, a low buzzing sound came from the surrounding ground. Small pieces of gravel and dust rose up, as if a giant beast was breaking out of the ground. Grandmother Bean immediately took a step back, shielding Lu Ling behind her, and made a few hand seals, casting a golden restriction. She could have run away immediately, but she really wanted to see what would happen after such a rare big formation was destroyed. If she missed this chance, she probably wouldn't be able to see it a second time in her life. But nothing happened. The shaking from the ground continued for a while. Then it calmed down. The flying gravel and dust fell back to the ground, and the spiritual energy in the formation also dissipated. Now they had become the most common stones, and this place had become the most common barren mountain. The key formation here had indeed been destroyed. But, just like all the other openings that were destroyed by Grandmother Bean, there wasn't the scary scene she expected. Grandmother Bean froze, frowning. She hesitated for a while before she dared to step forward again, cautiously reaching out and rubbing the huge rock. She confirmed that it was indeed destroyed. But why did it look like this? Her mind raced and she quickly realized one thing. This meant this formation wasn't the last one. Right now, in this wilderness forest, there was at least one array in operation. Moreover, all the spiritual power was drawn there, resulting in such a situation. Strange. Grandmother Bean opened her eyes wide, looking around. After a few breaths she suddenly said, "You wait here. Don't go anywhere." Then she flew up, heading towards the northwest. She sensed that there was still spiritual energy flowing in the northwest, 120 miles away from here. Her cultivation level wasn't low, and she had a magic weapon that could fly. Thus, it only took her less than half an hour to travel 120 miles. But the closer she got, the more confused she was. It was clearly the formation eye that he had destroyed 7 days ago. When she arrived above that place, all her doubts were gone. It was indeed the formation eye. 7 days ago she destroyed this place and now, it was restored. The formation eye here wasn't anything special. It was made of the air of metal and wood intertwining to create a golden grain orifice. Xianxia must have felt it was easy when he set it up. There was the air of metal and fire under the ground. He only put a piece of white jade and a piece of ebony on it, and the formation was completed. Taking advantage of the geographical location, he didn't need to consume too much spiritual energy. It was also easy for Grandmother Bean to break the formation. She just needed to move the soil, disrupt the flow of spiritual energy and collect the white jade and the ebony. But now that she had landed, she saw that someone had thrown the wine jars all over the ground in a mess. Some of them were empty and some were still in the air. There were a few bonfires next to the wine jars. Although they were all burned out, there was still some wood in the ashes. Looked like someone had passed by. She did see someone these days. The wild forest used to be very rich, but there were many fierce beasts in the forest, so ordinary people didn't dare to enter. People had to take a detour to travel between the two countries of Qingyi. It took 2 or 3 times more effort. But now that the forest was burned down, a natural passage was opened up. A few days ago she met a few bold caravans. It seemed that they wanted to open a new route here to transport some special products of the two countries. She met a lot, but she didn't. In this extremely vast space, which was almost as big as 3 prefectures, there were naturally more. The situation here was that the air of metal and fire under the ground was strong. The passing caravans probably set up camp here, built a bonfire, drank some wine and then casually threw them away. But they were also lucky. With a casual throw, it was actually in the position of the 5 elements. After all, this place used to be a formation, so it was easier to gather spiritual energy than other places. After these people left, the things that they had unintentionally left behind had unexpectedly constructed another formation eye. Hearing this, Dopa heaved a sigh of relief. This kind of thing was rare, but it wasn't impossible. Many people in the secular world unintentionally left something. It could accidentally form a formation because of the air of the earth. Or it could be said that the family master had bad luck. Or it could be said that the family master was rich and prosperous. This was what people in the city often called feng shui. Since that was the case, she just needed to destroy it. But it was a pity that Lu Ling didn't have the chance to see the magnificent scene that followed. Just thinking about this, Grandmother Bean activated the protective restriction on her body again and made the last attack. However, just as she was about to slam her palm down, she suddenly realized that something was wrong. If it was a caravan transporting wine, why would they drink the wine they were originally going to sell and throw the wine jars away? She had been in the secular world for a long time, so she knew that for wine merchants, the wine jars were very expensive. If it wasn't a caravan transporting wine, who would bring so much wine when they were traveling? Weren't they afraid that the wine would cause trouble? As soon as this thought flashed through her mind, she had already hit with her palm. The incomparably swift and fierce palm force stirred up the astral wind, instantly overturning those jars and the ashes and broken wood. However, Grandmother Bean's heart sank. The expected explosion of spiritual energy also didn't appear. Chapter 474. This meant that the array eye that had been accidentally constructed was not the last one. This time she didn't hesitate at all. She flew up to the sky. After a quick inspection, she found that there was another array eye operating 260 miles to the southwest. It only took a moment for her to realize that it was a key point that she had originally destroyed. This place was definitely not a coincidence. With a thought, she turned into a stream of light and flew away. 2 hours later she arrived. He found it was the same situation. Someone had rebuilt the array eye here. The technique was not as exquisite as Li Yunxin's, and the method was also very clumsy. It was still using some common things in the secular world, either by using the terrain or by using a random Taoist priest who had a little bit of magic power in the secular world as a guide to guide the flow of spiritual power. At this moment, Bean Grandmother's face became very ugly. She took a deep breath, landed on the ground and released 3 more restrictions before she dared to fly away again. She didn't even touch this array eye. But this time she didn't fly away but walked on the ground. Because she knew that if the previous and the one here were done deliberately, it looked very clumsy, but in fact it was very clever. It was so clever that even with her cultivation, she couldn't tell which one was better than Li Yunxin's. Li Yunxin's method on the level of skill could be regarded as exquisite beyond compare. But this unknown person's method on the level of intent could be regarded as unparalleled in the world. It was like Li Yunxin was cooking a delicacy with all kinds of delicacies. It was true that his skill was superb, but the delicacy also complemented each other. However, this unknown person had cooked a delicacy that was not inferior to the delicacies of the land and sea, with the wild vegetables and coarse grains on the roadside. With a group of ordinary people and animals, he had rebuilt Li Yunxin's array eye. As the saying goes, the greatest sound is silent, and the elephant is invisible. This kind of power. How could there be such a person in the world? Because of this, Bean Grandmother didn't even dare to touch it this time. Although Li Yunxin's method was excellent, he was trapped in the cloud mountain. And this person seemed to be in the forest in the wilderness. It was as if she had destroyed something and that person had rebuilt it. He was not a timid person. But in this kind of situation she didn't run away immediately. Instead she planned to investigate again. This was already a rare courage. Thus, on the 11th day she spent 12 hours running from dawn to dusk. In the end, with some difficulty he understood the whole story. He did not see that person. Instead it was a group of people. She had seen several caravans in the wilderness forest before. Now 5 or 6 days had passed, and she saw them again. But the problem was that the merchants didn't seem to know what they were doing. In the evening she finally witnessed what they were doing in the dark. A group of dozens of people and horses arrived near the formation eye that she had destroyed and stopped to unload the goods. Then, under the instructions of the leader of the caravan, the materials used to construct the formation were stacked properly. During this period of time, these people had been talking and laughing, without the slightest trace of nervousness or fear. This meant that they didn't know what they were doing at all. Even the leader of the caravan complained that this trip was requested by an unknown client with a large sum of money. As long as they followed the plan in the wilderness and unloaded the goods, they were not allowed to ask any questions. Although they had paid a large sum of money, they still felt that it was a bit strange. They were afraid that some kind of witchcraft was being used. The leader said this half-jokingly. After that he asked the 2 accompanying mages in the caravan. But in Bean Grandmother's eyes the so-called mages were just 2 unorthodox secular Taoists who had learned some unorthodox cultivation methods. Their pitiful spiritual power was not even comparable to a demon beast that had just achieved Taoism. The mages also didn't know that they were also entrusted with a large sum of money. It was also according to the previous plan, using a certain method that was within their capabilities to display a little bit of their methods. Then, it was like throwing a spark into a pile of dry firewood with oil. The spiritual power shot up into the sky and the formation eye was formed again. But whether it was the mortals or the unorthodox Taoists, their cultivation was not high enough to detect this great change, let alone know what they were involved in. Granny Bean only needed a single breath's worth of time to kill these mortals. But it was precisely these mortals that made Bean Grandmother feel even colder. At first she thought it was someone. This person had followed them all the way and casually rebuilt the formation eye in the wilderness as if he were taking a stroll in the park. But now she knew, that person didn't even show his face. He only asked these mortals to act according to the plan, and it was done. What kind of terrifying realm was this? Could it be the resurrection of the art saint? What was that person doing this for? At this point, this matter was not something that Bean Grandmother could bear or decide. She didn't attack those mortals but retreated into the darkness. After retreating to a relatively safe place, she took out another purple amulet from her sleeve. An hour later, Su Yusong and Zhuomuja looked at each other. It was not that they didn't expect this situation to happen. They had prepared beforehand. The formation that Li Yunqin had set in the wilderness might have some other protection. For example, demons might make trouble and the Sage of Calligraphy and Sword might interfere. But they didn't expect the current situation. It was a mortal. Such a bold mortal. Could only be the people of Munanju in the world. Those people called themselves the former subordinates of the art saint. Could it be that they had cultivated a painting master in these years? But as soon as this thought appeared, Zhuomuja immediately frowned. No. She paused and her tone was a little reluctant. Although I hate Li Yunqin, I have to say that his means and talent are extremely rare. If there was someone in the group of people of Munanju who could compete with him in painting, we would have found out long ago. This kind of person is not immortal and it's not easy to hide. Maybe. At this point she hesitated. It seemed that she didn't know what to say. But a certain thought in her mind was so terrifying that she really didn't want to say it out. Even she herself felt it was ridiculous. Su Yusong was silent for a while and then said in a low but slow voice, "It was the art saint. It was Qin Zhao." After saying this, the two of them fell silent. After a full quarter of an hour, Zhuomuja gritted his teeth. "How is it possible? I saw her die, I saw her destroyed in both body and soul. Even if you and I were wrong, at that time there were two sages. How could they be wrong at the same time?" Su Yusong was still silent for a long time and then said, "Maybe, at that time they had already found out, so the three of them," but when he said this he couldn't go on. He shook his head and said, "No. If the two sages had found out at that time, we couldn't have succeeded in the possession. But, if it wasn't Qin Zhao, who else in the world could have such a powerful means, and how could there be such a powerful means? Forget it, let's not think about this first." Zhuomuja closed his eyes and let out a long breath. Then he opened them again. Just treat her as the art saint. Just treat her as Qin Zhao's reincarnation for the time being. Su Yusong can have a reincarnation. Just treat it as Qin Zhao also using some means to have a reincarnation. Haven't we been guessing who the owner of the Southernwood house is? Now we'll treat her as Qining. But now we have to think. What is she planning to do by doing this? The two of them had always called themselves Su Yusong and Zhuomuja. They had always referred to the original two sages as he and she. But now, perhaps because of the sudden incident, they were flustered and even mentioned the name of the real sages again. But when these words entered the ears of Su Yusong, he didn't care much. He panicked. In the eyes of outsiders, it was hard to understand. After all, the overall situation had been determined, and there were only some unexpected twists and turns in the wilderness forest. But even so, it didn't matter. The spiritual power in the magic formation couldn't be completely poured out, but it didn't mean that the magic formation could still be used. If Li Yunqin died, he wouldn't survive either. But what made them flustered was not the matter itself. But after this incident, the means used by the person who might exist. They thought of the art saint. The two wandering souls had served the real calligraphy saint and the sword saint respectively. They had been with them for many years and had long understood their temperament and habits. And now they had the physical bodies of the two sages, and they had also secretly paid attention to the sage's reincarnation for many years. The fear in their hearts had gradually faded. Only some traces that were difficult to erase were left. But for the third sage, Qin Zhao, the reason why he provoked the calligraphy saint and the sword saint to get rid of her first instead of keeping her body for possession was that woman was the one they feared the most. The biggest difference between the art saint and the two sages was that although she was in the Taishang realm, she wasn't in the Taishang forgetting emotion realm. At that time, Su Yusong and Zhuomuja were just two sages with hearts as still as water. Although they could still move and cultivate like ordinary people, and they looked normal and even smiled, their hearts had long been empty. There were many things that they knew and should care about, but they just didn't care. However, Qin Zhao was completely different. In fact, she had the temperament of a mortal and at the same time she had the supernatural power of the Taishang realm. Such a different kind of person was already scary enough. But she was extremely smart. Smart but unscrupulous in her actions. No one could ever guess what she was thinking or why she thought that way. Therefore, no one was confident that they could win such a person over to their side. For example, when catching bandits, they could capture the weak ones alive. But if they met a fugitive, not to mention capturing him alive, even killing him would be a risky and difficult thing to do. In the eyes of the Freemasonry at that time, Qin Zhao was an extremely vicious bandit. For them, there was no other choice but to kill him and destroy his body and soul. Chapter 475. Therefore, after many years of hard work, they finally provoked the two sages and used all the power in the world to kill him. But the person who was killed after going through so many twists and turns, did he really not die completely? If it were someone else, they would not have such a ridiculous idea of treating it as Qin Zhao's reincarnation. However, when they thought of the woman's methods, they felt a long-lost fear in their hearts. That Qin Zhao would not be surprised no matter what he did. Su Yusong thought for a while with some fear and suddenly stood up. His face was gloomy and he wanted to say something but stopped. Then he paced in the hall from one end to the other and back again. After walking like this for a full 15 minutes, he suddenly turned to Zhou Xian and said, "We can't let the elders know about this." His face was terrifyingly gloomy. "I know them. If there is a small change in the situation and they are worried about Yunshan's safety, they will send us out. But if they know that Qin Zhao may still be alive, they would rather not have this battle and wait for another 1,000 years than let Yunshan fall and we come out of the mountain. Those people can only do what they say is perfect. We can't let them know about this." He paused and gritted his teeth. "What are you panicking for?" These 3 words seemed to be said to Zhou Xian, but also to himself. "We are not the same as before. The two of us are not the 2 walking corpses, nor are we 2 wandering souls. We are sages. Even if it is Qin Zhao's reincarnation. Humph. When she was at her peak we could kill her. Now she is just a wandering soul. Why should we be afraid of her? Besides, it may not be her. What are you panicking for?" "The master of Southern Wood Residence." "Humph." Su Yusong stared at Zhou Xian. "Haven't we been waiting for her to show up? Now with Li Yunxin as bait we are finally going to catch her. Just what I want." After saying all this in one breath, Zhou Xian did not say anything else. Su Yusong also stopped and was silent for a long time. Then he said, "What are you panicking for?" Another quarter of an hour passed. Zhou Xian said in a low voice, "Then how should we deal with it?" "Let's go," Su Yusong said without hesitation. "The people of Southern Wood House." He carefully avoided the words Qin Hua's reincarnation. Doing such a thing at this critical juncture is nothing more than telling us that they might be able to make use of the formation in the wilderness forest. If we don't do anything, they'll really succeed. If we interfere, we will have to divide our forces, and it will be disadvantageous for us to fight against the demons. This is an overt plot. We know what they are planning, but this is the only thing we can do: send people to watch over the wild forest. But then, Su Yusong frowned and took a deep breath. "We originally planned to give the people in the Black Tower to the demons to devour, and then send them to the emperors of the various countries. With such a lack of troops, they would definitely lose the first battle. Then, when the demons reach the foot of Tongtian Zeyun Mountain, the elders will have to ask us to come out of the mountain to deal with them. At that time we will reverse the situation. But since we are going to the wild forest, we can't lose the first battle against the magical beasts. At least, we can't let the army of demons break into Tongtianze. Otherwise, once that time comes, even the 2 of us can't reverse the situation. Then even if the Dragon Sun originally planned to send those demon soldiers and demon generals to death and improve their own realms, seeing that Yunshan is in front of them, they will inevitably have an idea and take down Yunshan first. Yunshan. For the demons, the temptation may be greater than realms. So, Su Yusong sighed. We originally planned to pretend to fight with the demons. Win or lose. But now, we must win the first battle. At least we can't lose. He repeated these words again and continued to ponder. Zhou Xian only looked at him. After watching for a while, she suddenly got up and walked out. Su Yusong looked up. Where are you going? To kill Li Yunxin. Zhou Xian said calmly. Didn't you realize it? If we kill Li Yunxin immediately, there won't be any trouble. We don't have to send people to the wild forest and we can still act according to the plan. Su Yusong stood up and looked at her sternly. I think you are panicking. Kill him? Why do you want to kill him now? Zhuo stopped walking. You just said, because of what happened in the wild forest, we can't afford to make any mistakes in the first battle. Su Yusong suddenly smiled. I mean, don't kill him now. After 3 days, don't kill him. Think about it. We originally only used Li Yunxin as bait. This kind of bait deserves to die. But now that Nanmuju made such a big and obvious move, this is the first time in many years. Doesn't it mean that they care more about Li Yunxin than we expected? When they knew that Li Yunxin was imprisoned by us on Yunshan Mountain, they went to the wild forest to prove that they have the ability to repair the magic array. They are telling us that even if we kill him, they can save him. Think about it, isn't Li Yunxin very important to them? If that's the case, how can they kill him to vent their anger? Su Yusong said in a low voice. It's better to keep him alive. Seems that he has more things than we thought. He didn't tell us everything. If we keep him alive, we can interrogate him and see what else Nanmuju does. Isn't that the same as turning the tables? On the day of the first battle, I'll humiliate Li Yunxin, who has been crippled, in front of the formation. On the one hand, I can destroy their morale, and on the other I can warn them not to act rashly. Is there anything better than this? Zhuo was stunned. He thought about Su Yusong's words carefully and frowned. So now, send someone to the wild forest first. Let's put on a show first. Su Yusong let out a soft sigh. He felt his mind clear again. It seemed that he had slowly gotten rid of the fear brought by Qin Zhao might still be alive. The overall situation became clear in his mind again. Even the fear slowly faded. There was even a vague sense of pride in his heart. Qin Zhao, I was afraid of you before, but not today. If you want to come, then come. Let's see, who is the ruler of the world now? As this thought appeared in his mind, it became more and more intense. Until the talisman in his sleeve shook violently. Xianxia also ran in like a gust of wind and bumped into Zhuo. But she didn't have time to act like a spoiled child as usual. She only raised her head, senior brother, senior sister. She widened her eyes and opened her mouth. After a long time she said, the Black Tower has fallen. Chapter 476. The Black Tower was 669 miles away from the Tongtian Lake in the Tongtian Swamp. It was the outpost and headquarters for the Xianmen cultivators to enter the central plains of Yi country. A large number of cultivators gathered here to build a line of defense. The camps of the allied forces that came from all directions were originally scattered around the Black Tower. The reason why they built such a line of defense here was because of the terrain. 200 miles in front of the Black Tower was the towering Manwan Mountain, which was the north. There were two huge mountain ranges in the east and west. One was the Howling Wind Mountain and the other was the Tuluntan Mountain. The natural dividing line between Qingye and Yi country was the Tulan River. The word Tulan in the Tulan River was the language of the Hunluan people who lived on the border of the two countries. The Tuluntan Mountain was also the name of the Hunluan people. It meant the heavenly palace that even birds can't pass. In fact, the Tuluntan Mountain was the highest point of Yi country and the surrounding countries. The Tongtian Swamp used to be a tall mountain which was a branch of the Tuluntan Mountain. Because of this terrain, the three mountains formed a pocket, and the central plains of Yi country was in the middle. The 8 Dragon Sons armies were stationed in the 3 mountains, while the Xianmen cultivators occupied the exit from the plains to the Tongtian Swamp. If anyone wanted to enter the Tongtian Swamp from the 3 mountains, they had to go through them first. Although the middle and high-level demons and cultivators could fly, there were not many of them. Many of the demons in the transcendent state did not have this kind of supernatural power. The cultivators in the transcendent state could use magic tools to fly, but they could not last long. It could be used in battles, but it could not be used for long-distance attacks. Therefore, a large number of low-level demons and cultivators were still limited by the terrain like mortals. In terms of military strategy, it was not far from that of a mortal army. The Black Tower itself was a Dao artifact. The tower was a magic tool called the 10 feet Black Wind Mace. When it was used, it stretched to a height of 100 feet and could easily see the surrounding situation. There was a red pearl embedded on the top of the tower, which was also a magic tool. If a high-level cultivator used a supernatural power, the red pearl would immediately release a deadly fire, and everything within 100 miles would be burned. This Dao artifact was only made up of these two magic treasures, but its power was astonishing. It was under the control of the new sect master of the Langia Grotto Heaven, Xianxia, to oversee the area and stop the demons. Considering his profound realm cultivation base, if he were surrounded by numerous cultivators, and he wielded this Dao tool with all his might, even a sage would have to temporarily avoid it. However, every gain must have a loss. The reason why the Black Tower was so powerful was firstly because it used red soil, and secondly because once it was set down, it couldn't be easily moved. The foundation of the 10-foot black wind mace would take a few days of effort. It would be like the roots of a tree digging deep into the ground, absorbing a large amount of spiritual energy. Only by releasing this spiritual energy through the red pearl at the tip of the pagoda would it have the power to scare away gods and ghosts. In the past few days, the numerous cultivators in the Black Tower had been doing this job, guarding the Black Tower as it completed its foundation building. On the 10th day he finally succeeded. This Taoist artifact was firmly rooted in the path leading to Tongtian Swamp, like a huge black sword filled with terrifying killing intent. At this point, the Celestial Sect of Wonders possessed a terrifying and powerful Dao artifact. There were also high-level cultivators who didn't lose out to the demons in number. There were also many low-level cultivators who, though few in number, obeyed orders and were intelligent. It was hard to imagine any possibility of failure in a short period of time. However, the impossible did happen. On the afternoon of the 11th day, when Su Yusong and Zhuamuxia looked out through the mirror talisman from Mount Xiaoyan, what they saw was, the Black Tower was cut into two and the upper half collapsed in the muddy soil like a broken sword. The red pearl at the tip of the pagoda was nowhere to be seen, but the ground was really blood red. It was unknown how many cultivators had died or been injured. The corpses of humans and demons were mixed together, and it was impossible to distinguish friend from foe, and they also sank into the mud. In the background there was a torrential rain and rolling thick clouds. It was as if the Milky Way had been overturned, pouring all the Silver River water into the Yezhong Plain. It was almost impossible to see the faces of people, even if they were 3 steps away, because the rain was really too heavy. This rain was not only heavy but also very strange. Rain, snow and hail mixed together. A thick mist surged in the sky, enveloping the land of 300 or 400 miles around the Black Tower, and lingered for a long time. There were also thunderous shouts in the field. Occasionally, mysterious lights flashed through the curtain of rain, and it seemed that there were still sporadic battles. Su Yusong saw this scene and knew that it had just happened. The people of the Celestial Gate were defeated, and they didn't even have time to send the news to Mount Xiaoyan. But, even so, how could they be defeated? With the Black Tower, how could the demons break through to the bottom of the tower? He turned his head and shouted, "Where did you get the news?" At this moment, Exon Shilio didn't care about his tone and immediately answered, "It's the people of Munanju. A quarter of an hour ago they found me and said that the Celestial Gate was defeated today, and asked me to pay attention to your movements these days, and report back at any time." Su Yusong was stunned and looked at Zhuamuxia and saw a fleeting fear in each other's eyes. Sure enough, it was the people of Munanju playing tricks. They made a move to help the demons. It seemed that they finally didn't intend to hide behind the scenes. But in reality, whether it was Su Yusong, Zhuamuxia or Xianxia who guarded the Black Tower, or even the many cultivators who had lost their vitality and were no different from mortals after being trampled into the mud, they all found it hard to imagine that the demons' great victory this time was actually because of a mortal. And this mortal walked into the sweeping mountains 3 days ago, and walked to the crypt where hatred was stationed. The sweeping mountains had long been occupied by demons and mortals no longer dared to enter. Even the allied forces of the various countries that returned to the capital took a detour. Before coming to Yi country there were many soldiers who believed that demons might exist, but never thought that they would really see them one day. After they experienced many things in the sweeping mountains and in the camp these days, they finally had a more intuitive impression of something that surpassed the limits of understanding of mortals. Demons did exist. Demons would eat people. Celestials did exist. Celestials might not save people. Thus, there were no traces of mortals in the sweeping mountains these days. However, in the evening 3 days ago, a mortal held a powerful talisman, his whole body glowing with golden light, and walked to the entrance of the crypt under the escort of a group of demons. The reason why the demons surrounded him was not because of reverence, but because they wanted to kill him from the first time they saw him. But the golden light around his body was very magical, and ordinary demons couldn't get close to him. Since they couldn't get close, they could only follow him all the way and send out warnings. Thus, more and more demons gathered along the way, and when the mortal walked to the crypt, there were already hundreds of demons around him. There were even 2 great demons of the true realm among them. This person looked to be in his 50s or 60s, but there were only patches of white on his temples. He wore a military uniform. It was a dark green robe with a tiger head and shoulder-length chainmail. This was the armor of the Li army. It should belong to a deputy general. If a knowledgeable person took a closer look, they would be able to tell from his saber, dagger and hat tassel that this person was a deputy general of the Li Kingdom's floating roaming army. The Li Kingdom's floating roaming army was a special and mysterious army. Many people knew of their existence, but it was very difficult to meet them. What they were best at wasn't fighting on the battlefield, but infiltration, deception, assassination, or releasing a lot of fake news to confuse the enemy. But today, a general of the floating roaming army in the evening held a talisman in his hand, and walked from the foot of the mountain to the Guanyuan crypt without changing his expression. This was the strangest thing that had happened in the past few days. When he arrived at the crypt, he looked down. There was a huge bottomless black hole and he didn't know where it led to. If a normal person saw such a terrifying scene, their legs would probably turn to jelly, but his expression was normal. He turned around and sat on a rock on the cliff, then freed his right hand and slowly took off his armor. The hundreds of demons around him let out a deafening roar of fear, scolding and cursing. If this talisman lost its effect, any small demon would be able to tear him to pieces in an instant. But this general's expression didn't change, as if he was sitting in his own tent. First, he took off his breastplate. A white mist immediately rose from his collar. This was because he had been trekking in the mountains for a long time, and the sweat on his armor had already evaporated into mist. Then he slowly took off his breastplate. This breastplate covered the front and back of his head. When he took it off, he pulled his left hand back and the talisman in his hand suddenly fell to the ground. As soon as the talisman fell, the golden light on his body immediately disappeared. The demons saw this opportunity and instinctively wanted to attack. But this general flipped his hand again, holding the floating talisman firmly in his hand, and at the same time took off his breastplate. The bright golden light shone again, and the demons that rushed forward were immediately forced back. Even though he had experienced such a dangerous situation, his face still didn't show any panic. He just sat down and let out a long sigh. Then he casually placed his breastplate on the big rock, smiled and finally said, "You want to harm me? You stupid demons. If you harm me, I don't know how many of you will be alive in the next few days." When they heard this, they thought he was talking nonsense. But only after the Black Tower fell did they realize the true meaning of his words. After saying this, he turned his eyes again and picked the largest and fiercest demon to look at. "Who among you is the leader? Quickly go and report to your king. Tell him, a friend from Southernwood House wants to deliver a great good thing." But how could any demon pay attention to him? They wanted to capture him and break his hands and feet before saying anything else. The group of demons clamored for a while, but no one moved. This general wasn't in a hurry and only smiled kindly again. "If you don't want to go, then just wait. Wait until..." But when he said this, the demons suddenly became quiet. The crazy and terrifying aura just now was swept away, and they all turned into beasts that only knew how to growl. They all retreated to the sides, making a path in the middle. A dignified man in a golden robe walked over with his hands behind his back, slightly frowning. To be able to make all the demons submit and fear, who else could it be other than the second son of the dragon, Yazi? You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.